Chapter 2908. Second Update. Rules? What kind of rules? In fact, it was very simple. It was strength. If one wanted to participate in the Battle of the Calling Posts, one must have enough strength. If one didn't have enough strength, then it was simply a waste of time and opportunity. One could just obediently become a spectator and watch. Why bother? As for how to prove that one had the strength to participate in the Battle of the Calling Posts, it was very simple. According to the initial rules, one just had to break through the battle formation set up by the Heavenly Phoenix City Guard. This battle formation was equivalent to a 9-star heaven rank. In other words, even a 9-star heaven rank might not be able to break through it. However, if a 10-star heaven rank wanted to break through it, it wouldn't be too difficult. There were a total of 3 of such battle formations, which meant that only 3 people could break through the battle formations at a time. The efficiency is too low. I don't have time to waste with you. After the female Ardent Phoenix Guard finished announcing the rules, the male Ardent Phoenix Guard's voice suddenly sounded with a bit of impatience. After all, there were at least tens of thousands of people gathered here. There were even more people who were constantly rushing over. However, only a small portion of them had reached the heaven rank, and there were even fewer who had reached the 9-star heaven rank. If they were to test according to the rules, who knew how much time it would take? It would be a pure waste. Boom! Very suddenly, a monstrous might exploded from the male Ardent Phoenix Guard's body. The Heaven Fire Phoenix under him also seemed to have sensed it in an instant. It suddenly spread its wings and let out an extremely sharp and resounding cry. The sound wave was vast and mighty, as if it could shatter the vacuum. A powerful and blazing flame also burst out from the Heaven Fire Phoenix's body. It burned endlessly, as if it was going to burn through the sky. The blazing scarlet flame didn't hurt the male Ardent Phoenix Guard on its back. The range and the aura that erupted from him seemed to have merged into one. In an instant it more than doubled, becoming even more tyrannical and shocking. Like an instant eruption of a volcano, a torrent that was like an ocean gushed out. It was extremely blazing and violent. In an instant it engulfed the entire place and directly hit the bodies of the people present. The terrifying blazing made people feel as if they were in the mouth of a volcano and directly faced the impact of magma. It was as if they were going to be crushed and turned into ashes in an instant. In just an instant, many people couldn't bear it. They were directly hit by the impact and couldn't get up. They couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood as their auras withered. There were people who forcefully endured it. In the short span of a breath, the terrifying blazing and berserk aura had only erupted for one breath, and immediately, several tens of thousands of people had collapsed. Less than 1,000 of them were still standing. However, the majority of these 1,000 people were also on the verge of collapse, and continuously fell to the ground. Only 100 people were left standing. Chernzong was among these 100 people. The sudden burst of blazing and violent aura indeed surprised Chernzong. However, it couldn't really affect Chernzong. Chernzong had faced and endured even more powerful auras before. Although he could withstand it, it was undeniable that the strength of the Ardent Phoenix Guard was indeed very strong. This kind of aura, if placed in the outer universe, would be at the level of a powerful half-saint. In the inner universe, it wasn't an ordinary 10-star battle strength. It was at least at the level of a top 10-star battle strength. As for whether it was stronger or not, it could only be determined by an outbreak of battle. Or, the other party was willing to go all out and completely unleash his aura without holding back. It's you guys. The male Ardent Phoenix Guard stretched out his finger and drew a circle in the void. It was facing the 100 people who were still standing. The lowest combat strength of these 100 people was at the level of a 9-star battle strength. In the inner universe, it wasn't difficult to cultivate to the heaven stage. However, it wasn't easy to have a 9-star battle strength. In other words, the combat strength of an ordinary Heaven Stage warrior could be raised to 7 stars at most. As for the 8-star and 9-star battle strength, it was quite difficult. Therefore, those who had 8-star and 9-star battle strength were considered geniuses. Among the tens of thousands of people, the last 100 people were qualified to fight for the name card. As for the others, they were more or less injured, but there was nothing they could do. Even if they were dissatisfied and unhappy, there was nothing they could do. After all, the other party was a Ardent Phoenix Guard. Since the Ardent Phoenix Guard had made such a decision, the guards of Sky Phoenix City naturally had to cooperate and let them go immediately. Oh right. In this fight for the name cards you can use all means, regardless of life or death. The male Ardent Phoenix Guard seemed to think that it wasn't lively enough and added a sentence with a faint smile. What he meant was that they could use all means to kill others in the fight for the name card. As soon as these words came out, some people frowned, and some revealed a sinister smile. The female Ardent Phoenix Guard's expression couldn't be seen, but the look in her eyes showed that she actually didn't agree with the male Ardent Phoenix Guard's words. However, as a companion, she didn't refute on the spot and remained silent. After all, one was a companion, and the others were unrelated. Even if there were companions among these 100 people, it was a matter of the future. No matter what the rules were like, if they wanted to participate, then participate. If they didn't, then get lost. It was that simple and direct. Since they were already here, there was no reason to give up. Fight. 100 people fighting for 10 name cards. The difference between 9-star and 10-star was directly reflected. The difference between 9-star and 10-star was actually very obvious. It was completely one-sided. Therefore, although 100 people participated in the fight, in reality, it was a fight between less than 20 10-star prodigies. As for the other 9-star prodigies, they were just background characters. Even if they were lucky enough to get a name card, they wouldn't be able to take it away. However, they still had to try their luck. What if their luck was really good? Wouldn't they be able to participate in the banquet and see the ancient Phoenix Divine Maiden? Just thinking about it made them extremely excited. It was worth a try. Moreover, 9-star heaven rank powerhouses all had life-saving trump card. They wouldn't be killed so easily. Fight. In an instant, one by one, they burst out with astonishing speed and rushed toward the 10-name card. Chen Zong directly turned into a sword light. His speed was extremely shocking, and he broke through the air in an instant. In an instant, he left most of the people behind him and was far ahead. 10 name cards. This meant that those 10-star prodigies had more than one target, and there wouldn't be a situation where more than 20 people fought for the same name card. It indirectly reduced the pressure of the competition. There were 2 10-star prodigies who were eyeing the same name card as Chen Zong. As for the 9-star prodigies, well, they weren't included. Charge. The 3 10-star prodigies, including Chen Zong, burst out with full speed and rapidly approached the name card. In an instant, the figure of one of them flashed. Like a refraction of light, he directly surpassed Chen Zong and the other 10-star prodigy and approached the name card. However, the other person snorted coldly and suddenly waved his palm. The palm energy was like the waves of the sea, sweeping over layer by layer. However, in an instant it reversed and intercepted the person in the front. As soon as he was intercepted, he was immediately affected and couldn't directly get the name card. Insignificant skill. After the person snorted coldly, he suddenly pulled out his saber. There was a flash of cold light on the saber. It was like riding the wind and breaking the wave. The extremely shocking saber light cut through everything and split the waves that were coming back. It was like a hot knife through butter. A light flashed in Chen Zong's eyes. Immediately, he took a step forward. His figure seemed to have merged into the void and disappeared. When he reappeared, he had already passed the 2 people and appeared next to the name card. His finger was like a sword as it pierced through the layer of protective light outside the name card. His finger also pinched the name card. Oh, he has mastered the way of space. The eyes of the two blazing phoenix guards lit up slightly. They were a little surprised, because in the inner universe, the way of space wasn't so easy to comprehend and master. There weren't many people who cultivated this way. They didn't expect to see one here. It was a little surprising. Stop! Bastard! The two 10-star prodigies' expressions changed drastically when they saw Chen Zong pinching the name card. They both roared angrily and unleashed their strength without hesitation. A terrifying aura soared into the sky. Slash! The long saber pierced through the air. The saber light was cold and sharp as it directly cut through everything. It instantly attacked Chen Zong. Such a powerful attack left a long mark in the void. Rumble! The sea current turned into a huge whirlpool that swept over from all directions. With Chen Zong as the center, it constantly strangled Chen Zong as if it wanted to kill him directly. Whether it was the power of the saber or the power of the whirlpool strangling, they were both very powerful and made Chen Zong feel threatened. Unsheath. Slash. Without the slightest hesitation, Chen Zong instantly executed the skylight sword drawing technique. At the instant his sword left its sheath, the wisp of flowing light was peerlessly sharp, extremely dazzling, and extremely resplendent. It directly slashed through everything and slashed apart the vortex that was moving towards him. Chen Zong took a step forward and dodged the terrifying saber light. He rushed out of the whirlpool, strangling him, and appeared outside. He quickly flew out with the name card. That sword is a little interesting. The eyes of the female blazing phoenix guard flashed. She looked a little surprised. He had mastered the way of space, and had such a unique sword technique. He was indeed capable. Haha, it's just SOSO. The male blazing phoenix guard laughed with some disdain. After Chen Zong snatched the name card, he did not intend to fight with anyone else and was about to leave. However, the two people were furious and quickly chased after him. At the same time, not far away, there was a person staring at Chen Zong with eyes that were shining with a terrifying light. His eyes were full of murderous intent and malice. His overbearing power continued to flow into the sword light that surrounded him. As the sword light trembled, the power continued to condense, becoming more and more overbearing and shocking. Faintly, there seemed to be strands of electric arcs that surrounded the sword light. The electric arcs were blue in color and emitted extremely terrifying destructive fluctuations. Bailey Yen stared at Chen Zong with eyes full of malice and murderous intent. Suddenly, an extremely cold and ferocious smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. It was full of terrifying murderous intent. The surroundings seemed to be extremely cold. It's your honor to die under the strongest killing move of the Bailey family's unique flying sword technique. 100-mile flying sword? Piercing dragon. There was a low roar that sounded like muffled thunder coming from the depths of his throat. In the next moment, the sword light that was surrounded by blue electric arcs suddenly blasted out. Chapter 2909. Third update. I went out and got a heatstroke. The sword light seemed to have turned into a blue thunderbolt, carrying a terrifying power that could destroy everything. It instantly broke through the air, leaving a dazzling trace. That kind of power was invincible, assassinating everything. Piercing dragon. It was the ultimate move of the sword art of Bailey Miles. In the inner universe, there was no such thing as a divine art, only a unique skill. The ultimate move was the ultimate move of the unique skills. Once it was used, it was bound to be a terrifying and fatal attack. Chen Zong felt a chill for no reason, and a strong sense of crisis broke out in an instant. In an instant, he saw a blue thunderbolt with a monstrous sword power that broke through the air and bombarded toward him. It was going to kill him mercilessly. A threat. Chen Zong felt an obvious threat. From the corner of his eyes, he saw the malicious and ferocious killing intent on by Lian's cold face through the thunderbolt sword light. This was the unique skill of the sword art of Bailey Miles that Wu Jie had mentioned. It was indeed very terrifying. With Bai Lian's strength at the peak of the 9-star level, he could actually make Chen Zong feel threatened. After all, Chen Zong's strength was not an ordinary 10-star level. However, the absolute gap in strength, especially the gap between the 9-star level and the 10-star level, was very big and not so easy to cross. However, the ultimate move of the sword art of Bailey Miles could do it. It was really terrifying to threaten a 10-star level with a 9-star level. In the blink of an eye, Chen Zong was struck by the blue bolt of lightning and was directly pierced through. A smile suddenly appeared on Bai Lian's face. So what if you're stronger than me? The ultimate move of the flying sword art of the Bailey family is a terrifying killing move that transcends stars. It's extremely powerful and unparalleled. However, in the next moment, Bai Lian's face suddenly changed because the one that was pierced by the piercing dragon was not the real Chen Zong, but an illusion. An illusion that could pass off as the real one. If it was an illusion formed by high-speed movement, it would be difficult to pass off as the real one and confuse others. However, an illusion of the heart could. Even if it only had 1/10 of the strength of the real one, it was enough to confuse others in an instant. Those who could distinguish between the real and the fake in an instant were usually stronger than Chen Zong. It's actually fake. The two blazing phoenix guards were secretly surprised. At that moment, they also thought that Chen Zong had been hit. They didn't expect that it was fake. It was like an afterimage, but not like an afterimage. It was more like a clone. In short, it was very interesting. However, with their level of cultivation and eyesight, it was difficult for them to completely understand it. In an instant, Bai Lian's expression changed drastically. He felt all the hair on his body stand on end. A strong sense of crisis surged in him, and he felt like he was about to explode. Dodge! Without any hesitation, Bai Lian immediately burst out with his full speed. His body and sword became one as he turned into a sword light and quickly dodged. At the same time, he crushed a jade pendant. The moment the jade pendant was crushed, it released a powerful energy fluctuation that surrounded his body and formed a layer of protection. This was his life-saving trump card. It was a life-saving trump card given to him by the Bailey clan. It was enough to defend against the attack of an 11th star, and would be difficult to break in a short time. Only a 12-star attack could break it in an instant. Chen Zong's figure appeared. He unsheathed his sword and immediately unleashed the heavenly light sword drawing technique. The power of this sword was very powerful. Ordinary 10-star cultivators couldn't defend against it. However, when it hit the protection on Bai Lian's body, it was like a stone sinking into the sea. It couldn't break through at all. Instead, it was completely absorbed. You will definitely die. Bai Lian's vicious voice immediately sounded. The murderous intent was extremely shocking. With the protection on his body and the speed of the 100-mile flying sword technique, Bai Lian completely burst out and immediately rushed out, intending to escape. Since his strongest attack couldn't do anything to his opponent, it wouldn't be a good thing to continue. On the contrary, the protection wasn't endless. There was a limit to it. He had to leave first before making any plans. Even if Chen Zong wanted to chase after him, it would be difficult for him to do so. This was because the two 10-star cultivators had already arrived and wanted to snatch the name card in Chen Zong's hand. This name card couldn't be stored in a storage artifact. Chen Zong had already tested it. There seemed to be a layer of mysterious power on the name card that prevented it from being stored in a storage artifact. He had no choice but to keep it close to his chest. The other 9 name cards were also snatched by other people. They were about to break out of the encirclement and immediately leave the phoenix-facing stage to hide. They would only appear after the banquet started. This way they could save a lot of trouble. Chaos. Below the phoenix-facing stage, there was extreme chaos and a great battle broke out. A few unlucky 9-star cultivators were killed. The other 9-star cultivators were terrified and quickly ran away. Chen Zong drew his sword and slashed out. After breaking the saber light, his body flashed and split into 3. Including his original body, there were 4 figures that flew in different directions. Heart image. Of course, Chen Zong had a total of 9 heart images. However, when he was in the outer universe, releasing 9 heart images at once would consume a lot of energy. If he were to do it in the inner universe, the energy consumption would increase by more than 10 times. With his current strength, if he were to release 9 heart images, it would consume about 40% of his energy. It was very shocking. Therefore, Chen Zong didn't want to do it unless he had no other choice. Unleashing the power of the 3 Dao Heart Phantoms would consume more than 10% of his strength, but it was enough to confuse the enemy. Although the heart image's energy was only a tenth of Chen Zong's, Chen Zong controlled the heart images to release their aura completely while his original body restrained it. He made it so that his aura was the same as the heart images, making it harder for others to distinguish. Was it real or fake? At that moment, the 2 10-star cultivators didn't know which one was real. After a slight hesitation, the 4 figures immediately flew in different directions. Chase. Intercept. At this moment, there was no time to hesitate, because if there was any hesitation, time would be wasted. 4 figures shot out, and 2 of them were pursued by the 2 10-star experts. Blade light slashed down, directly cutting them to pieces. The Songhai torrent also tore that figure to pieces. It's fake. Absolute B** starred. The 2 of them immediately realized that they had made a mistake in their judgment. They had chased after a fake and not the real body. With this delay, the real body had already fled far away. That's right. At this moment, Chen Zong had already rushed out of the range of the Phoenix facing stage and into the crowd. He was as nimble as a fish as he flew away. Flying was not allowed in Heaven Phoenix City. This was the rule. Whoever violated it would be punished. Of course, if it was someone like the ancient Phoenix Divine Maiden, no one would dare to punish her. The so-called punishment was completely relative. Flying was allowed in the fight for the name cards on the Phoenix facing stage. This was loosening the restriction. However, flying was not allowed after leaving the Phoenix facing stage. Thus, in just a few breaths' time, Chen Zong had escaped far away with the name card. The faces of the 2 10-star cultivators who were competing with Chen Zong were ashen and extremely gloomy. Immediately, the person with the saber chased after Chen Zong without giving up. He looked like he was going to catch up with Chen Zong and snatch the name card. The other person, however, gave up. He turned around and rushed to the others to participate in the fight for the name cards. After getting the name card, Chen Zong's heart did not fluctuate too much. He was only a little excited, but he quickly calmed down. After all, getting the name card did not mean that he had obtained the right to participate in the banquet. There was still time. Before the banquet truly began, others could still compete with him for the name card. If it was snatched by someone else, then the name card would no longer belong to him. Naturally, he would lose the right to participate in the banquet. The banquet did not matter. The most important thing was that at the banquet, it was very likely that he would be able to see the true face of the ancient Phoenix Divine Maiden and come into contact with her. That was the most important thing. Taking the name card, Chen Zong quickly returned to his room in the restaurant. Only then did he take out the name card and look at it carefully. This was a palm-sized name card. There was a pattern of a golden red phoenix spreading its wings on it. It was very lifelike, as if it wanted to rush into the name card. With that golden red phoenix as the source, a faint halo spread out and covered the entire name card. It was also because of this layer of power that the name card was difficult to destroy and could not be stored in the storage divine tool. Chen Zong observed it for 10 breaths, then put the name card back into his pocket. Now, he just had to wait. Wait for the banquet to begin. At that time, he would go and participate with the name card. As for now, many thoughts flashed through Chunzong's mind. Because Chunzong knew that the others who did not snatch the name card would definitely not give up. They would definitely make other moves. At that time, it would be very normal for him to be targeted. At this time, it was best to hide so that others could not find him and avoid trouble. However, Chunzong did not know where he could hide. He was unfamiliar with this place. Since that was the case, then he could only face the next trouble. With a sword in hand, there was nothing to fear. Finally, the fight for the name card at the Phoenix-facing stage also ended. A piece of news was spread. The banquet would be held at sunset 3 days later. Before the banquet began, the others could continue to fight for the name cards. However, there was a rule that powerhouses above the 10-star level were not allowed to fight. Once they did, they would be expelled immediately. If they were invited to intervene, the inviter would also be punished and expelled. In other words, if they wanted to fight for the name cards, the highest strength could only be at the 10-star level. If it was only at the 10-star level, Chunzong was not afraid. Even if it was at the 11-star level, Chunzong was not afraid. After the rules were announced, the undercurrent in Sky Phoenix City was turbulent. It was as if there was an invisible wind and clouds changing. The invisible torrent was constantly rushing and surging. Chunzong's super-strong perception could feel that the invisible pressure was slowly invading. It was only one night. When the sky was slightly bright, Chunzong's door was knocked. The knocking was rhythmic, low and powerful. "Who is it?" Chunzong opened his eyes and spoke neither slowly nor hurriedly. "Sir Chunzong, please open the door. I have something to discuss with you." A low voice came from outside the door. The person did not say his name and identity. Instead, he responded with his own rhythm. "The name cards are not for sale." Chunzong thought for a moment and immediately understood what was going on. He responded without hesitation. The voices outside the door instantly fell silent. In the next breath, the door was directly broken open by a great force. A tall figure, like an iron tower, directly stepped in. When his foot landed, the room seemed to be about to sink. Chapter 29:10. Returning to normal, with a body that was over 2 meters tall and extremely strong, he was like an iron tower as he walked over. The floor of the room shook as if it was going to sink. An astonishingly vigorous and heavy aura spread out and filled the room, causing everything in the room to be suppressed by an invisible gravitational force. Bang, bang, bang! A series of sounds rang out, and the teacups in the room were shattered. The tables and chairs were also broken, unable to withstand the impact of this pressure. However, the bed Chunzong sat on was undamaged. Although this pressure was tyrannical, it could not affect Chunzong at all. At most, it could only affect a 9-star. The tanned iron tower-like strong man widened his eyes and stared at Chunzong with an ominous glint in his eyes. He wanted to give Chunzong a strong pressure. Behind the strong man was a young master wearing a white robe and holding a paper fan. He had a smile on his face, as if everything was under his control. "Greetings, Brother Chun." The young master folded his paper fan and said with a smile, "I am Tantai Bai Mu, a disciple of Daluo Palace's Tianluo Palace. I have admired the ancient phoenix goddess for a long time, but because of some matters, I did not have the chance to participate in yesterday's competition. It is a pity. I wonder if brother can help me." This white-robed young master's attitude and tone seemed to be humble, but there was a kind of arrogance in his bones. It was like the arrogance of a rich young master facing a poor family. No. Chunzong's expression did not change. His tone was neither cold nor hot, and he directly replied without hesitation. "That's good then, thank you." The white-robed Tantai Boimu smiled faintly, once again opening his fan and gently waving it. He had a complacent look on his face as he said to himself. Suddenly, his tone paused and his expression changed. "Brother, what did you say?" Young master, he refused. The tanned iron tower like strong man spoke, his voice low and vigorous. Brother, don't be in a hurry to refuse. I will pay 100,000 cultivation coins. The white-robed young master's expression was slightly cold, and then a smile appeared on his face as he offered a so-called high price. 100,000 cultivation coins. Chernzong knew that a restaurant like the one he was currently staying in was considered a second-grade restaurant in heavenly Phoenix City. The price of a room per day was 10 profound coins. As for the few first-grade restaurants, they were even more expensive. Every night, it would cost at least 15 to 20 profound coins. To an ordinary person, a month's worth of living expenses was around 30 cultivation coins. After conversion, 100,000 cultivation coins was indeed not a small amount. Chernzong indeed needed cultivation coins. If he could get his hands on 100,000 cultivation coins, it would be more convenient for his future operations. However, Chernzong did not use this method to obtain cultivation coins. The name card would definitely not be given out. Regardless of the price, even if the other party offered a price of 1 million cultivation coins, Chernzong would not agree. Of course, the other party would definitely not offer such a high price. 1 million cultivation coins might not even be enough. Get out and fix the door. Chernzong responded neither slowly nor quickly. His voice could not be considered cold, but it did not have the slightest bit of enthusiasm either. Young master, in the end, we still have to settle this with our fists, the strong man said in a muffled voice, his voice rolling like muffled thunder. As his voice fell, a frightening aura suddenly condensed from the strong man's body. It was as if a volcano was about to erupt. A frightening power would pour out in torrents and smash Chernzong's body to pieces. Chernzong was unmoved. Fighting was prohibited in heavenly Phoenix City, to avoid unnecessary destruction. This rule was a restriction that even people from heaven-ranked forces had to abide by. Because even if the heaven-ranked forces of the ancient Phoenix domain joined forces, they would still be unable to match up to the ancient Phoenix Mountain. Since they could not compete, they could only obediently abide by the rules and act within the rules. The strong man was actually just bluffing. He did not dare to make a move here. Otherwise, even if he defeated the other party and obtained the invitation, he would be disqualified by heavenly Phoenix City. He just wanted to scare Chernzong and see if Chernzong would take the initiative to hand over the invitation. This was obviously impossible. After all, although his strength was not weak, in the end, he was still inferior to Chernzong. Brother, if that is the case, then don't blame me for offending you. Tantai Baimu's eyes flashed with a touch of coldness. Challenge. This was allowed by heavenly Phoenix City. Especially at this stage of the competition for the invitation, heavenly Phoenix City directly stated this rule. If someone with the invitation was challenged, they had to agree and could not avoid the battle. This was to select more outstanding people to participate in the banquet. In the case of a challenge, both sides could only send out one person. Many people were not allowed to join forces, which would break the rules. Of course, if they hid and weren't found, then they could avoid the challenge. The challenge rules were like this. You couldn't issue a challenge just because you knew who had the name card. You had to find the person with the name card first and issue the challenge face to face. The eyes and ears of heavenly Phoenix City were paying attention to the people with the invitation. Chernzong had the invitation and could not avoid the battle. Chernzong was also not afraid. Then, he would fight and show the world his strength. He was not someone to be trifled with. If one wanted to challenge him, then they had to have enough ability and strength. Otherwise, they would only be asking for humiliation. At the Phoenix Battle Arena of heavenly Phoenix City, Chernzong stepped forward. Tantai Baimu also came with his subordinate. Young master, leave it to me. The strong man like an iron tower said in a muffled voice. Be careful, his strength is not weak. Tantai Baimu chuckled and waved a folding fan with a painting of mountains and rivers. He looked leisurely and seemed to have confidence in the strength of his subordinate. Come up and die. The strong man who was like an iron tower suddenly jumped. His body seemed to weigh 1,000 caddies as he suddenly fell. When he landed on the Phoenix fighting stage, the entire stage also trembled. It was as if it was about to collapse as it emitted a terrifying muffled sound. What a strong physique! This man is a physique cultivator. Around the Phoenix battle arena there were other cultivators. Although there were not many, there were still dozens of them. They just happened to see this scene and were immediately attracted and whispered, "Yes, this strong man like an iron tower was a physique cultivator." In the inner universe, there were also physique cultivators and chi cultivators. Similarly, there were fewer physique cultivators than chi cultivators. From the beginning, Chen Zong could see that this person was a physique cultivator. His physique was extremely strong and his chi and blood were incomparably vigorous. It seemed that within that tyrannical body, there was some kind of amazing power contained. Tantai Baimu leisurely waved his folding fan, as if he was full of confidence in his subordinates. This was because he knew that his subordinates' strength was very strong. Once the battle strength of his subordinates was fully unleashed, he would have to use his full strength to defeat them. When there was a problem, the subordinates would take the initiative. Chen Zong's figure flashed and appeared on the Phoenix battle arena, facing the strong man directly. Erupt! The muscular man's body suddenly trembled. A powerful force erupted and directly charged out. It was as if it wanted to shatter everything. It was extremely tyrannical, and it caused a storm to wreak havoc in all directions. It was even more shocking. That aura was extremely violent, causing the spectators below the Fighting Phoenix arena to continuously exclaim in surprise. Chen Zong was also a little surprised. This person was indeed somewhat capable. Ha! Another violent roar was heard. Within the strong man's extremely strong body, a layer of blood light spurted out. His muscles suddenly bulged and swelled up. Every muscle burst out an amazing power, causing his already strong body to become even stronger and more majestic. The aura that he emitted was also more terrifying. This aura had directly surpassed the 9-star level, reaching the threshold of the 10-star level. Yes, Chen Zong, with his extraordinary perception, could roughly judge the level of his opponent. It was equivalent to the opponent on the 10th floor of the Battle Star Pagoda. The opponents on each floor of the Battle Star Pagoda were at the lowest level of the 1-star level. The storm raged in all directions, extremely violent and ferocious. Chen Zong was directly hit by the storm, but his expression did not change at all. The strong man took a step forward, and his thick feet instantly stomped on the ground. The entire arena shook, as if it was going to be crushed. Fortunately, the building materials of the Phoenix Battle Arena were extraordinary. Even an ordinary 11-star level strength would not be able to truly destroy it. The moment his foot landed, the strong man's calf directly swelled up. Green veins protruded out like a coiled snake. It was a shocking sight. The power actually passed through his calf and directly hit the soles of his feet. With a boom, as if the wind was roaring, the strong man's entire body seemed to have turned into a huge crossbow, carrying an extremely terrifying aura as he rushed forward. The distance of 100 meters was covered in an instant. Body refiners were most adept at close-quarters combat. Only through close-quarters combat would they be able to bring out their formidable strength to the fullest and display the strength that they should possess. One punch. The strong man crossed 100 meters in an instant. He clenched his fist, which was the size of a human head, and covered it with a layer of blood-red light. His forearm also swelled up in an instant, turning into a black-red color. It was extremely terrifying. Like a meteor falling from the sky, it blasted out mercilessly towards Chen Zong. This kind of challenge allowed one to kill. If one was killed, it would only be because one's skills were inferior. The strong man intended to smash Chen Zong's head with one punch. He had always been so decisive, ruthless, and direct. He did not leave any leeway. An astonishing murderous aura also spread out and rushed over. Chen Zong knew his opponent's intention. Since that was the case, then go to hell. Drawing his sword, Chen Zong did not hesitate to slash out. An astonishing murderous aura burst out and merged into the sword. Void kill sword technique. Between heaven and earth, within all living things, there was nothing that could not be killed. Compared to his opponent's ferocious and earth-shattering punch, the power of Chen Zong's sword seemed to be more restrained, making it more difficult for others to sense. However, its power was definitely stronger. After all, Chen Zong's combat strength was truly at the 10-star level, not at the threshold of the 10-star level. The sword broke through the air, and the sword light arrived first. It bypassed his opponent's ferocious punch and directly slashed his opponent's extremely strong body, instantly shattering it. The tyrannical power burst out, causing the strong man to retreat. A 1-meter-long sword wound appeared on his chest. It was so deep that his bones could be seen, and blood was dripping. An astonishing sword aura was raging inside, crazily strangling the strong man's body, causing more injuries. What a strong physique! Chen Zong was secretly shocked. The sword just now should have been able to split his opponent's body, but unexpectedly it did not. It only left a sword wound that exposed his bones. Chapter 29:11. You have some skills. The folding fan paused, his brows slightly wrinkled and relaxed, and he said with a slight smile. The burly man looked down at his chest. The sword wound was so deep that his bones could be seen. It was a shocking sight. Blood was constantly oozing out, and a terrible sword chi was rapidly raging in his body from the wound, strangling him. Anger. In an instant, the burly man was enraged to the extreme. His anger was like the eruption of an ancient volcano, releasing an extremely terrifying might that soared into the sky. At the same time, something seemed to have awakened within the burly man's body, emitting an extremely violent and terrifying roar that shook the sky and the earth. The roar was like the roar of an ancient giant beast. As soon as it appeared, it turned into an invisible sound wave that impacted in all directions, crushing everything in its way. The world shook and the entire arena trembled. Chen Zong looked dignified. His strong perception made Chen Zong feel that there was an ancient and terrible power awakening in the burly man's body. Tantai Bomu smiled, opened his folding fan again, and gently shook it. Roar. The violent roar sounded again, and it was even more mighty and shocking, as if it could shatter the sky. Bloodline. This person is a bloodline body refiner. There were bursts of exclamations all around, and they also fell into Chen Zong's ears, letting Chen Zong know the state of the burly man at this moment. The power of bloodline was stimulated. In the inner mystic world of the ancient universe, this was the world of bloodlines. Most masters had extraordinary bloodlines. Powerful bloodlines gave cultivators superb cultivation talent and unique bloodline power, which made them different from cultivators without bloodlines and allowed them to master more powerful strength. For example, the ancient Phoenix Mountain was a bloodline force. Along with the burly man's roar, a 5-meter-tall shadow appeared on his body. It was a pitch-black shadow of a big bear. It was incomparably strong, like a hill, and its aura was extremely violent and overbearing. The next moment, the 5-meter-tall big black bear's shadow was compressed into the burly man's body. The burly man's body was constantly shaking, his bones were stretching, and his muscles were bulging. His whole body was expanding, and finally, he turned into a 3-meter-tall figure. It looked like a man, but not a man, and a bear, but not a bear. It was a special form between a bear and a man. This was the form of a bloodline body refiner after the power of bloodline was stimulated. It had more power than the original, and became more tyrannical. Bloodline Bear Man. It's the Earth-grade Black Light Bear bloodline. Of course. Even among the same level of bloodline, there was a difference in level. The Black Light Bear bloodline was a relatively ordinary level among the Earth-grade bloodlines. However, having the Earth-grade bloodline was very good and many people envied it. The ancient mysterious world was not small. It could be said that the bloodline ran through the entire ancient mysterious world, whether horizontally or vertically. It was just that most people's bloodline was at the unrated level. It was very thin and could not even be stimulated. Even if it was successfully stimulated, it would not be obvious to the body. Most of them were just at the level of being invisible. At the human class bloodline level, it would be different, and the Earth class bloodline was even more amazing. Tyrannical. After the burly man stimulated his bloodline and turned into a bloodline bear man, his aura increased several times. He directly stepped into the 10-star level from the threshold of the 10-star level. He was even more tyrannical than the ordinary 10-star level. Between each star level, there was a difference in strength. It was generally divided into 3 levels: ordinary, top, and extreme. The bloodline bear man's aura was tyrannical. It was stronger than ordinary and weaker than top. It was between the two. The sword wound caused by Chen Zong's sword had already healed. It seemed that he had not been injured and was not affected at all. The aura emitted by the 3-meter-tall bloodline bear man was extremely violent. With a roar, its body suddenly rushed forward, bringing along a terrifying pressure that could crush everything. It was as if a mountain was moving horizontally with a terrifying force, smashing through the sky with a force that could shatter the dome of heaven. That kind of power made Chen Zong's expression change involuntarily. His eyebrows became dignified. Strong. The power of this collision was very tyrannical, so tyrannical that it was frightening. The 3-meter-tall body was extremely strong. His feet left clear footprints on the arena, and the whole arena was shaking non-stop. Chen Zong slashed out with his sword. The sword light broke through the air and slashed on his body, but it was instantly shattered and could not leave any wound. In the next moment, Chen Zong's body was directly hit and instantly shattered, dissipating into nothingness. It was an afterimage left behind by high-speed movement. His real body appeared on the side. His body was floating in the air, twisting his waist. The light in his eyes condensed and exploded in an instant. Heavenly Light Sword Drawing Technique? 6. Sky Slash. Since the origin swordsmanship could not break the opponent's defense, then he would attack with a sword way divine technique. The Heavenly Light Sword Drawing Technique was extremely powerful. It was a terrifying sword way divine technique that focused on instant explosion and destruction. When the sword slashed out, the blade of the sword could not be seen. There was only an extremely dazzling sword light that was so dazzling that one could not look directly at it. It was filled with endless sharpness, and it left behind a dazzling and eye-catching trace in the sky as if it was invincible. The Heavenly Light Sword Drawing Technique with double the power was even more powerful. The speed of the sword was extremely fast, and there was no way to dodge it. It directly slashed on the bloodline bearman. He was a physique cultivator, so his physique was extremely strong and his defense was astonishing. After activating the power of his bloodline and transforming into a bloodline bearman, the strength of his physique had increased exponentially. However, in the face of Chen Zong's tyrannical slash, he was still unable to completely resist it. Slash. Slash. The terrifying sword light rushed forward and slashed into the bloodline bearman's body, leaving a huge wound. Blood rained down. Retreat. With a roar, the blacklight bearman immediately retreated. At the same time, he waved his arms like a bear's paw with terrifying power. He directly slammed it toward Chen Zong in an attempt to smash Chen Zong into pieces. However, what he smashed was only an illusory figure. Heavenly Light Sword Drawing Technique? 6. Swallows fly twice. In an instant, 3 sword lights burst out and slashed the blacklight bearman's body one after another. The wound caused by the heavenly light sword drawing technique's sky slash continued to expand and deepen. Roar. On the blacklight bearman's body, a black light instantly burst out from his body like a burning flame. His aura doubled again, resisting Chen Zong's sword drawing technique. Retreat. Okay, admit defeat. A seemingly gentle but somewhat harsh voice sounded. It was Tantai Baimu's voice. He had to admit that his subordinate's strength was not bad, but he was still not the opponent's opponent. Very strong. This rogue cultivator named Chen Zong was very strong. He was at least at the top of the 10-star level. Then, he could only do it himself. Hearing Tantai Baimu's words, the blacklight bearman quickly retreated and jumped out of the arena. When he landed, his body quickly shrank. The power of his bloodline was restrained and returned to silence. His face was slightly pale, his eyes were full of fatigue, and his aura was dispirited. Not only was he injured, but the key was the aftereffect of burning his bloodline power at the last moment. It would take a lot of time to slowly recover. Stimulating the power of the bloodline was like using a secret technique. Burning the power of the bloodline was equivalent to using a forbidden technique, and the price was even greater. Brother Chen's strength is indeed very strong, beyond my expectations. Tantai Baimu's figure flashed as if he was walking on the wind. His robe fluttered in the wind, giving off an indescribable sense of carefreeness and ease. While walking on the wind, he said to Chen Zong with a smile, "With your talent and strength, I can be your referrer and introduce you to the Daluo Palace. You can become a member of the Daluo Palace, or even a member of the Celestial Palace." Exclamations suddenly sounded. The Daluo Palace was a heaven-level force in the ancient Phoenix domain that was second only to the ancient Phoenix Mountain. It was very powerful, and the Tianluo Palace was the palace where the most elite experts of the Daluo Palace gathered. To be able to enter the Daluo Palace was already very amazing, and the Tianluo Palace was even more amazing. Envious gazes sized up Chen Zong. "Do you still want to fight?" Chen Zong did not answer the question. He had no interest in joining the Daluo Palace. Tantai Baimu's subordinate was defeated and left the arena to save his life, but it did not mean that Tantai Baimu had lost. He had not made a move yet, so he could still fight with Chen Zong. It had to be said that the rules of the challenge were not beneficial to the holder of the name card, because others could continuously challenge the holder until someone defeated him. It was a vicious cycle. Every battle would consume one's strength. Although one would be given time to recover their strength, it would only be around an hour. After an hour, regardless of whether one's strength had fully recovered or not, one would have to face the next battle unless they handed in their name card. In this way, the person who snatched the name card first would either have to hide with the name card until the banquet began, but that was not easy. Or, they would have to show unparalleled strength and defeat all the strong enemies to keep the name card. Chen Zong's approach was the latter. Fight fearless. Half an hour was enough for Chen Zong to recover the energy he had consumed. He did not even need half an hour, but Chen Zong was not arrogant and did not let others realize that his strength was recovering quickly. Therefore, half an hour later, he got up. "Your strength has fully recovered. Do you want to give you some more time?" Tantai Baimu said with a smile. It sounded like good intentions, but in fact, it was a psychological tactic to suppress Chen Zong invisibly and to gain the upper hand in terms of momentum. If Chen Zong agreed, then unknowingly, he would fall into a disadvantageous position. Even if Chen Zong did not feel it, Tantai Baimu's own momentum would increase a little. In fact, whether Chen Zong agreed or refused, he would be at a disadvantage in terms of word. Therefore, Chen Zong's response was an explosion of sword intent. The extremely pure and incomparably tyrannical sword intent broke through the air in an instant. The sword pressure was so shocking that it directly made Tantai Baimu's expression change. he immediately released his own martial will to resist. The collision between the sword will and the divine will of the martial way caused a shocking storm to sweep out. Chapter 29:12. This was a confrontation of wills, and it directly gave rise to a formless storm that wreaked havoc. It was as easy as crushing dry weeds, and it caused the people below the Phoenix battle arena to be extremely shocked. At least, it was a battle of the top 10 stars. Strong. Very strong. In Tantai by Mu's eyes, there was a hint of excitement and battle intent. Daluo Palace, Tianluo Palace. Spirit of the Wind, Tantai by Mu. Tantai by Mu's tone carried some seriousness as he revealed his identity. It's him. Spirit of the Wind, Tantai by Mu, the heaven's pride that possesses the wind of absolute breath. It is said that he has the potential to become a top heaven's pride. The discussion rose in an instant and also entered Chen Zong's ears. Wind of absolute breath, that can be ranked in the top 100 among the heavenly bloodlines. Heavenly bloodline. This was an extremely shocking bloodline, not to mention a bloodline that was ranked in the top 100. Even if it was ranked in the top 100, it was still extremely shocking. The ancient Xian world had existed for countless years. The cultivation of the bloodlines had also existed for countless years and had already been perfected. Therefore, there was a clear distinction between the different bloodlines. My name is Chen Zong. Chen Zong gazed at Tantai by Mu and was not affected by the exclamations. My title is Matchless Sword. When Chen Zong's last words fell, the surroundings suddenly became silent. Everyone revealed a blank expression, including Tantai by Mu. What did he say? If I did not hear wrongly, he seemed to have said that his title is Matchless Sword. Matchless Sword, matchless among swords? Such a big tone. Such arrogance. Below the battle phoenix stage, voices rose, becoming more and more intense, full of dissatisfaction and doubt. Ha 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 ha, title, who gave you this title? You gave it yourself. Tantai by Mu laughed. You must be clear that a title is not given casually. Otherwise, it will only attract trouble, and in the end, you won't even know how you died. Tantai by Mu's words were not without reason, but had a basis. A title, generally, must be recognized by others, and it must be recognized by many people. If it was given by oneself, it must be supported by enough battle results to let others know that you are worthy of that title. Matchless Sword. This title was not ordinary. What did it represent? It represented unparalleled swordsmanship and unparalleled swordsmanship. What was unparalleled? This was the only one, the only example. There wouldn't be others, no one else that could compare. Cultivators defied the heavens and fought for supremacy. Each and every one of them continued to climb higher mountains and become stronger. This was especially so for those supreme geniuses and even demon-level geniuses. They were extremely powerful and wanted to suppress others, especially those of the same generation. Only by achieving this would one be truly invincible. Only then could one truly be called unparalleled. Chen Zong, an unknown genius, actually had the title of Unparalleled Sword. Didn't that mean that no one in his generation could compare with him in terms of swordsmanship? Even if Tantai Baimu was not a sword cultivator, he felt that this title was very arrogant, conceited, and overconfident. If those powerful sword cultivators were to find out about this, they would most likely come knocking on his door to fight him to the death. Who could claim supremacy in the way of the sword? Only by fighting with the sword. The winner would be king and the loser would die. Chen Zong's unparalleled sword's name had been recognized by the will of the outer universe and given to him directly. That was a title. But in the inner universe, not being recognized by the will of the inner universe wasn't a simple matter. The title of Matchless Sword was indeed too high profile and would attract the hostility of many sword cultivators. However, Chernzong still did so to promote his own reputation and let Chernzong spread the word of matchless sword. In this way, he would attract the attention of Yunyanxin. If Yunyanxin was really in the inner universe, regardless of whether Yunyanxin was related to the ancient phoenix divine maiden, by doing so, he would shorten the time to find Yunyanxin. As for the hostility of other sword cultivators, Chernzong was not afraid. It was nothing more than drawing his sword and fighting. Who was stronger and who was weaker would be known in a battle. Even if he was defeated, Chernzong would work hard to improve himself and become stronger. He would truly be unparalleled in the way of the sword and claim supremacy in the way of the sword. No matter what others said, it could not affect Chernzong at all. The sword will gushed out and pressed forward, constantly attacking Tantai Bai Mu. Tantai Bai Mu's expression became more and more serious, and his martial will became more and more condensed and tyrannical, constantly resisting. Invisible waves also spread out, attacking in all directions. On the Battle Phoenix arena, a shocking aura swept out like an invisible storm. Immediately, Tantai Bai Mu attacked because he felt that the sword will of his opponent was constantly strengthening. If this continued, he did not know how strong it would be. He was forced to attack because of the pressure. The folding fan opened in an instant, and the moment it opened, a powerful force burst out. It followed the folding fan and bombarded out, turning into a sharp blade that was a few meters long. It cut across the sky and shot to kill. Chernzong pulled out his sword. The sword light flashed and the tip of the sword followed. The moment it hit the wind blade, he immediately felt the power contained in it. It was extremely tyrannical and incomparably shocking. Flicking away the wind blade, Chernzong took a step forward and disappeared into the void. As if penetrating through the void, he took another step forward and appeared beside Tantai Bomu. His sword pierced through the air and pierced towards him. It seemed like an ordinary sword stab, but everyone could clearly see its trajectory and even speculate its next trajectory. However, the people below the Battle Phoenix arena could not help but feel their hair stand on end. It was as if the stab was directly aimed at them, making it impossible for them to dodge. No matter what, they could not dodge. Tantai Bai Mu was also slightly startled, and his eyes could not help but flash a touch of seriousness. This kind of swordsmanship was really amazing. But in the next moment, Chernzong's sword pierced through Tantai Bai Mu's body. Not knowing when, Tantai Bai Mu only left a lifelike shadow, avoiding Chernzong's attack. Rumble! The violent wind instantly exploded, and the astonishing momentum was incomparably vast. A shocking storm directly swept over, carrying an astonishing power. It was formed by the combination of countless wind blades, madly strangling. This was a large-scale attack that covered the entire Battle Phoenix arena. Except for Tantai Bai Mu himself, everything else on the Battle Phoenix arena would be attacked. Chernzong's expression was solemn. He was surprised by this method. Since there was nowhere to dodge, then he would cut it open. With a sword in hand, he could cut everything. Heavenly light sword drawing technique? 10,000 forms of dust. Without the slightest hesitation, Chernzong directly displayed his ultimate move, and its power was extremely tyrannical. The moment the sword light cut out, everything under the sword light, no matter what it was directly cut and shattered, turning into the most primitive dust particles between heaven and earth. There was no luck. This sword cut out a vacuum, and cut towards Tantai Bai Mu. Tantai Bai Mu's expression could not help but change. He had never thought that the opponent's swordsmanship would be so terrifying. What kind of secret technique was this, that it could make him feel a fatal threat? For Chernzong, it was best to end the battle quickly. With absolute strength, he would make his name known, and make people more afraid of him, and not dare to easily target him. 10-star limit. Tantai Bai Mu murmured, and his heart was shocked. The opponent turned out to be a 10-star limit Heaven's Pride. He originally thought that the opponent was the best. Tantai Bai Mu unconsciously sighed. He knew that it would not be easy to defeat Chen Zong, who claimed to be the unparalleled sword. He could only use the power of his bloodline. If he could, he actually did not intend to activate the power of his bloodline. But now, he had no choice. Activate Wind of Absolute Breath. This was one of the top 100 heavenly bloodlines in the ancient mysterious world. Its power was mysterious and amazing. Wisps of green wind appeared, surrounding Tantai Bai Mu's body. Tantai Bai Mu's body naturally floated in the air, and his long hair fluttered in the air. It was gradually colored by an invisible force, and turned into a wisp of green. Tantai Bai Mu's eyes also changed, and a green light condensed in his black pupils. His aura also increased a lot in an instant, and there was a kind of liveliness and agility. Wind. The wind was blowing everywhere, and every wisp of wind was green. Every wisp of wind carried a terrifying and obscure power. When a wisp of green wind pervaded the air, Chen Zong touched it, and his expression could not help but change. The power contained in that wisp of wind had a kind of killing intent. Wind of Absolute Breath. Tantai Bai Mu's body floated in the air, and his long black hair was colored by the green light. His eyes turned into a green light, and his body was surrounded by wisps of green aura. His whole person became more and more tyrannical. He had activated the power of his bloodline, but unlike the previous person who had the black light bear bloodline, he did not change the shape of his body. Different bloodlines, after being activated, would have different ways of manifesting. The most common one was the beast bloodline. After being activated, the body would be affected, and it would achieve a kind of transformation effect. For example, the black light bear bloodline, after being activated, would transform into a black light bear man. It was neither a human nor a bear, and was somewhere between a bear and a human. With a boom, Tantai Bai Mu waved the folding fan in his hand, and immediately rolled up a terrible storm. The storm was mixed with wisps of green power. That was the power of the Wind of Absolute Breath. It contained an even more terrifying power that made Chen Zong feel threatened. In the next breath, the green light on Tantai Bai Mu's body instantly split into two clones. Together with the real body, the three clones quickly dispersed, and directly surrounded Chen Zong. Attack! Streaks of cyan storms swept across the area. Chen Zong's expression did not change. His figure flickered, and the two clones of his heart instantly condensed. Together with the real body, they separately attacked the three Tantai Bai Mu's clones. It seems so. Below the Phoenix battle arena, everyone exclaimed. Chen Zong was like a goshawk fighting the storm. His figure was extremely agile, but also extremely sharp. He avoided the raging storm and attacked one of the Tantai Bai Mu's 4 swords of no killing. An astonishing murderous intent gathered in this sword. Tantai Bai Mu was directly penetrated, but Chen Zong's expression changed. He immediately used the void to escape. At the same time, Tantai Bai Mu's body directly exploded, forming a terrible green torrent. That was a clone formed by the power of the Wind of Absolute Breath. It was not strong, but after being shattered, it would self-destruct. The power was amazing. If Chen Zong's perception was not extraordinary, and he instantly sensed the danger, he would not have felt good if he had been hit by the self-destruction of the Wind of Absolute Breath clone. Chapter 29:13 Storm of Extinction. The low and deep voice was like a gust of wind that instantly blew over, and it brought with it an extremely shocking might. It gave Chen Zong the feeling that it came from the left, but an extremely terrifying force condensed and erupted from the right, and it seemed to completely erupt like a torrent that broke through a dam, releasing a monstrous might that destroyed everything. It was a diversion, coming to kill. In an instant, a blue storm broke out directly, crushing everything, sweeping from the right, like the water of the Milky Way pouring down, without mercy. burst, 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 burst with everything. The storm that broke out contained a terrible power that could destroy everything, and nothing could stop it. After Tantai Baimu displayed this move, his eyes instantly condensed to the extreme, and a little dark blue light condensed in the center of his pupils. Immediately, his body turned into a wisp of blue wind, integrated into the storm of extinction, and bombarded Chen Zong. That wisp of blue was fleeting and agile, unpredictable, but it gave birth to a little extreme sharpness. Chen Zong turned around, and the sword light suddenly lit up, suddenly chopping down from above. This sword seemed to cut off the mountains and rivers, split the heavens and earth, and was invincible. The impact of the collision between the sword light and the storm was so shocking that it seemed to shatter everything around. A wisp of blue light in the storm's aftermath was erratic, waiting for an opportunity to move. It was like a lurking poisonous snake, staring at its prey, ready to burst out a fatal blow at any time, releasing its own poison to tear and poison the target, and then devour it. The opportunity was seized. The thorn of extinction. In an instant, that wisp of blue light bloomed, turning into a long awl. The tip of the awl was sharp to the extreme, terrifying to the extreme, and directly stabbed out. This stab immediately made Chen Zong, who had extraordinary perception, feel his hair stand on end. The storm of extinction was not Tantai Baimu's killing move, but to confuse Chen Zong. Of course, if Chen Zong was defeated by the storm of extinction, then there was nothing to say. However, if the storm of last breath couldn't defeat Chen Zong, it could confuse him. After all, the power of this move wasn't weak at all, and it was also used for the next killer move. Thorn of Extinction. Condensing the power of the wind of absolute aura to the extreme, it was incomparably sharp, capable of piercing through everything. Nothing could stop it this time. The power of the wind of absolute aura, the word absolute aura was used to describe it. His hair stood on end. Chen Zong's expression changed unconsciously. A cold current grew in his spine and spread through his brain like lightning. At that moment, Chen Zong felt as if all the pores on his body had been enlarged. The cold current spread all over his body, and a strong sense of crisis kept attacking him. A fatal threat. What this attack brought was an extremely fatal threat, an extremely terrifying threat. Time Divine Art. Flowing Breath. After coming to the ancient sealed world of the inner universe, Chen Zong had not used the flowing breath divine art for quite some time. Firstly, it was to hide, and secondly, the power consumed to use the time divine art here was much more than when he was in the outer universe. Because in a place like the ancient sealed world, the strength of space was amazing, and the stability of time was even more amazing. It was not easy to shake. When Chen Zong used the flowing breath divine art to shake the time of this world, he had to use more power. One breath. Chen Zong intercepted a moment from the incomparably stable time divine art of the ancient sealed world. Although it was only one breath, it made Chen Zong feel like an ant trying to shake a tree. The backlash of the time divine art made Chen Zong's expression change dramatically. In an instant, he felt as if his muscles and bones were sore and his limbs were weak. Fortunately, he had successfully intercepted a wisp of time divine art and obtained that one breath. Although Chen Zong had long known that using the power of time in this world would consume a lot of energy, he had never expected that not only would it consume a lot of energy, but it would also trigger a backlash from the mighty power of time. It was not an active backlash from the mighty power of time, but a passive backlash. Just the power of the backlash was enough to make him almost unable to bear it. It was too terrifying. The stability of this world's space-time was really amazing. In a breath's time, Chen Zong immediately dodged, avoiding the fatal blow of the thorn of extinction. However, in Tantai Baimu's eyes, Chen Zong had been pierced. In an instant, the terrifying thorn of extinction pierced through his body. When this fatal blow penetrated Chen Zong's body, A look of astonishment appeared on Tantai Bai Mu's face. It did not hit? Did his attack miss? How could it be? The timing was obviously very precise, and the blow should have been effective. How could it miss? What had happened in that instant? Tantai Bai Mu was puzzled. When he thought back, he realized that in that moment there seemed to be an extremely mysterious fluctuation. It was that mysterious fluctuation that allowed Chen Zong to avoid his killing blow, his fatal blow. Sword light suddenly erupted, like a river of swords, surging forward and enveloping Tantai Bai Mu in an instant. It was as if there were sword light everywhere, without the slightest gap. Rays of sword light struck the wind of Tantai Bai Mu's body, shattering one after another, like specks of starlight sputtering out. More sword lights arrived in an instant. Sword technique. The origin source sword technique erupted in an instant. The power of the origin source sword technique was not weak, and the consumption of power was relatively small. It was enough to support more use. Tantai Bai Mu was swallowed up by the sword light. The entire Phoenix battle arena seemed to have become a domain of sword light. The sword light was everywhere. However, Tantai Bai Mu, who was within the sword light, was constantly supporting himself. His wind of absolute breath was indeed very strong, forming a layer of protection that Chen Zong's sword technique could not penetrate. Then, the last sword. Under thousands of sword light, Chen Zong's figure wandered among them, making it impossible for Tantai Bai Mu to catch him. After the heavenly sword was struck out, it instantly returned to its scabbard. Chen Zong's spirit and cultivation strength also rose in an instant, condensing to the extreme, as if it had been twisted into fine steel. This tyrannical power, in an instant, madly poured into the heavenly sword, poured into the scabbard, and constantly covered the sword edge. The scabbard seemed to be unable to contain the sword edge. The astonishing sword constantly pushed forward, and was about to burst out and break open the heavens and earth. Draw the sword. Without hesitation, when the sword was pushed to the extreme, Chen Zong's right hand was as fast as a phantom, but also as steady as an ancient mountain. In an instant, he grasped the sword hilt, and a sharp light shot out from the depths of his eyes, piercing through space and time. Heavenly light sword drawing technique? One sword to break the 9 heavens. The sword light directly split the void, cutting a 100-meter-long crack, exuding a terrible destructive power, as if to destroy everything. It made the hearts of the people below the Phoenix battle arena tremble. Tantai Bai Mu's expression changed dramatically. The power of this sword directly made his hair stand on end, and it was a fatal threat. His full strength burst out, and the power of his blood was urged to the extreme. Wisps of blue wind circled around, constantly covering and circling, becoming more and more astonishing, forming layers of shields to resist Chen Zong's fatal sword. Retreat. At the same time, Tantai Bai Mu exploded with extreme speed, rapidly retreating and widening the distance. The sword light cut through layers of obstacles, and arrived in front of Tantai Bai Mu, and then cut through his body, mercilessly cutting him in half. At the moment when Tantai Bai Mu was cut, Chen Zong frowned. The sword was the eye of the arm, connected by blood. Chen Zong was very clear about that feeling. He did not cut the enemy, and what was cut was only an afterimage, or an incarnation. Chen Zong also caught a glimpse of a blue light from the corner of his eyes. He broke out with extreme speed, and in a flash, rushed to the edge of the Phoenix battle arena, and then rushed out of the Phoenix battle arena, and fell down, transforming into Tantai Bai Mu's body. His face was incomparably pale, and his breath was extremely chaotic. In his eyes there was a trace of fear. At that moment, Tantai Bai Mu thought that he was going to die, that he was going to be killed by the opponent's sword. Fortunately, at the last moment, he used a secret technique, and directly transformed into an incarnation, and his real body escaped, like a cicada shedding its carapace, avoiding the fatal sword and saving his life. Almost. Just a little bit more and he would have been killed. That feeling of being shrouded by death was very uncomfortable, and it directly impacted his mind. Chen Zong did not feel regretful that he was not able to kill the opponent with one sword. He only needed to show his powerful strength. The limit of 10-star battle strength. In other words, without such strength, don't even think about defeating Chen Zong. Even if one had the limit of 10-star battle strength, they might not be able to defeat Chen Zong and obtain that invitation. More and more people gathered below the Phoenix battle arena. There were already more than 100 people, and each of them was stunned. The top heaven's pride of the heavenly palace, Tantai Bai Mu, who had the title of the Spirit of the Wind, had lost. It was unbelievable. However, the reality had happened before their eyes, and there was no doubt about it. And after witnessing this battle with their own eyes, they also knew how intense, shocking, and dangerous it was. Clap, clap, clap. Very suddenly, a slow and rhythmic clapping sound rang out, and it directly awakened the crowd from their shocked state, and it led them over, showing an amazing control of the rhythm. Everyone's gaze followed, and their eyes fell on a figure. No one knew when that figure had appeared. No one had noticed him before, but now, he had become the focus of everyone's attention in an instant. He was wearing a pure white robe, and his appearance was handsome. His eyes were deep, and there was a faintly discernible smile at the corner of his mouth. He looked so charming, and his aura was also faintly discernible, filling the air with traces of indescribable sharpness. Such a person, no matter where he was, would become the center of attention, and attract everyone's attention. It's him! Shocking Heaven Sword by Li Wu Yun. Exclamations rang out in an instant, and it was as if a frenzied wave had been set off in an instant, surging and sweeping in all directions. Shocking Heaven Sword by Li Wu Yun, the number one of the younger generation of the Bailey clan, and one of the famous peerless heavens prides of the ancient Phoenix domain. He was also one of the few people who had been directly invited to the ancient Phoenix Divine Maiden's welcoming banquet in Sky Phoenix City. There were countless rings of light around his body, and it was extremely eye-catching and dazzling. They had never thought that such a peerless heaven's pride would actually appear here at this moment. Excitement. For no reason, hundreds of people felt extremely excited. Chapter 29:14. Shocking Sky Sword by Li Wu Yun. Why is he here? On the Phoenix fighting stage, Chen Zong narrowed his eyes and stared at Li Wu Yun. From the corner of his eyes, he saw a figure standing behind Li Wu Yun. That person's face was dark and his eyes were filled with murderous intent as he stared at Chen Zong. Bai Li Yan. Chen Zong immediately knew why Li Wu Yun had come here. He was probably here for Chen Zong and had been called over by Bai Li Yan. The words that Wu Jie had said that day rang in Chen Zong's mind once again. Bai Li Wu Yun had the title of Shocking Sky Sword. He was at the 11th star level, but no one knew which level he was at. However, under the Bai Li flying sword technique, he had once injured a 12-star super realm fighter. In other words, Bai Li Wu Yun's most powerful attack could reach the 12-star super realm. This was undoubtedly a terrifying person. He was a peerless genius of the younger generation. Bai Li Wu Yun's gaze seemed to carry a hint of a smile, but if one looked closely, they would discover that it was not a smile at all, but a coldness, a bone-chilling coldness. It was as if he had no regard for anyone else, as if he did not care about the people around him, and as if he could not hear their heated discussions. He only stared at Chen Zong. Chen Zong stared back at Bai Li Wu Yun fearlessly. Indeed, Bai Li Wu Yun's battle record showed that he was very powerful. However, Chen Zong had experienced people who were even more powerful than Bai Li Wu Yun. Bai Li Wu Yun's gaze alone was not enough to make Chen Zong feel pressured. Bai Li Wu Yun was slightly surprised. He was only at the 10-star level. Even if he was at the peak of the 10-star level, He would not be a match for an 11-star level fighter. Moreover, he was not an ordinary 11-star level fighter. He was at the peak of the 11-star level. He was only a step away from the 12-star level. You are Chen Zong, right? Bailey Wu Yun opened his mouth. His tone was leisurely, but it also contained a hint of arrogance. I need the name card in your hands. Give it to me and tell me what you want. His tone was casual, but there was a kind of bossiness in it. It was as if Chen Zong had to do what he said. That kind of strong momentum was unconsciously manifested and emerged. Chen Zong couldn't help laughing. The sense of superiority was so obvious and strong. To be honest, in his life, he had experienced many things, big and small. He had met many strong and weak people, and there were also many people who had a sense of superiority. Chen Zong had never associated with such people, because he could not get along well with them. As the saying goes, if you don't agree, half a sentence is too much. As the saying goes, those who walk different paths cannot make plans together. I also need a name card. Chen Zong smiled and said slowly. He was not humble because of the sense of superiority of the other party. Even in front of a true saint, Chen Zong would show the respect of a strong person, and not show his own humility. Since I was born, I have been constantly improving myself. Since I stepped onto the path of the sword, I have been fearless. How can I be humble? I will give you a chance to follow me. Bailey Wu Yun opened his mouth again. The price is your name card. Chen Zong, quickly kneel down and give me your name card. Bailey Yen took a step forward and pointed at Chen Zong. He immediately shouted. His recruitment and the recruitment of his brother, Bailey Wu Yun, were two different levels. It was like the recruitment of a minister and the recruitment of an emperor. The meaning was different. This was a great honor. After all, Bailey Wu Yun was a peerless genius. He was definitely a strong person who could reach the surpassing realm. He had a high chance of reaching the saint level in the future. To be able to follow such a person was a blessing. At least, when the people around heard this, they all looked envious. Hearing Bailey Yan's words, Chen Zong couldn't help but shake his head. He didn't want to talk to them anymore. He turned around and walked in another direction. He planned to leave the Fighting Phoenix arena and go back to rest. As for challenges, if there were still people who wanted to challenge him, he would accept. It was only a 10-star level battle. What was there to be afraid of? Stop! Seeing Chen Zong turn around and leave, Bailey Yen immediately shouted angrily. Bailey Wu Yun frowned slightly. There was a hint of anger in his eyes. How dare he be so rude and ignore him in front of his face? Brother Chen, didn't you call yourself the Peerless Sword? Why did you leave without saying anything in the face of the shocking heavenly sword? Isn't this unworthy of your name? Very abruptly, there was a chuckle that seemed to carry a bit of concern. Tantai Baimu opened his folding fan and gently waved it. He had a leisurely and contented appearance. There was a smile on his face as he gazed at Chen Zong, seeming to carry a bit of concern. It sounded like he was concerned about Chen Zong, but in fact, Chen Zong immediately knew the other's sinister intentions. Peerless Sword. Peerless Sword. Bailey Wu Yun's title was the shocking heavenly sword. He was a peerless genius. In front of a sword cultivator, calling himself the Peerless Sword was indirectly pointing at the other sword cultivators' noses and saying, "In the way of the sword, you are all inferior to me. I am the model of the Peerless Sword, the representative of the Peerless Sword." Who could accept that? Before Bailey Wu Yun could say anything, Bailey Yen was the first to explode. Who do you think you are? How dare you call yourself the Peerless Sword, the Peerless Sword? Bailey Yen pointed at Chen Zong and scolded him. However, he was usually arrogant in front of others and rarely scolded people. He could only say, "Who do you think you are?" over and over again. There was nothing new about it. Chen Zong did not care about Bailey Yen at all, because a terrifying sword essence filled the air. It was earth-shattering. It directly rushed towards him and locked onto him. It was Bailey Wu Yun. Bailey Wu Yun did not say anything. Instead, he directly released his own sword essence. The sword essence suppressed Chen Zong and directly crushed him. However, Chen Zong withstood such a strong sword essence. He really suppressed Chen Zong. Even Chen Zong released his own sword essence to contend with it. For a moment, he did not seem to be at a disadvantage. You do have some ability. However, the title of Peerless Sword, you do not deserve it. Bailey Wu Yun's eyes were extremely sharp. It was as if he wanted to pierce through Chen Zong. Immediately, he retracted his gaze and a mysterious smile appeared on his cold face. In his eyes, there seemed to be a unique ray of light that kept spinning. His tone suddenly became serious. I, Peerless Sword, Bailey Wu Yun, bet my reputation as a sword cultivator to have a battle with you. When Bailey Wu Yun's words fell, the surroundings were first silent. Then, it was like a pot of boiling water. Bet his reputation as a sword cultivator. What kind of price was that? Of course, if one analyzed it carefully, there was actually no substance to it. Regardless of whether he won or lost, there would not be any losses. However, it sounded so high and mighty, as if it was very powerful. Tantai Bai Mu could not help but smile. His eyes flashed with a hint of ruthlessness. He had lost. He had lost to Chen Zong's sword. Of course, he would not let Chen Zong have it easy. However, in terms of strength, he was indeed not Chen Zong's opponent. How could he take revenge? The appearance of Peerless Sword, Bailey Wu Yun, undoubtedly gave him this opportunity. Peerless Sword. Peerless Sword. Just this title alone was enough to cause Chen Zong a lot of trouble. See, here came the trouble. According to the rules of the name card contest, Bailey Wu Yun could not attack Chen Zong, because he was an exceptional Heaven's Pride. Furthermore, he had already received an invitation to the banquet. He did not need a name card. The reason why he came to the name card this time was naturally because of his brother, Bailey Yen. But now, Bailey Wu Yun had found a chance. Using his reputation as a sword cultivator as a bet, he challenged Chen Zong. Since it did not involve a name card, then, as a sword cultivator, Chen Zong could not refuse. It had to be said that this was an open scheme. Bai Lian immediately smiled. As long as Chen Zong agreed to fight with his brother, Bai Liyun, he would be crushed. Bai Lian only needed to tell his brother not to kill Chen Zong, but to beat him half to death. Only after Chen Zong's strength had decreased to the extreme would Bai Lian issue the challenge. He only had a 9-star combat strength. If he were to challenge a 10-star, even if the 10-star was injured, no one would say that he was taking advantage of the situation. Moreover, even if they were to say that, so what? He had to get the name card first. Then, he would be able to kill his opponent and get the name card. How wonderful would it be to kill 2 birds with 1 stone? As Bai Lian thought about it, he unconsciously revealed a smile on his face. He was intoxicated by his own wit. Chen Zong ignored Bailey Yen. However, Chen Zong could not refuse Bailey Wu Yun's words. In the name of a sword cultivator. He was a sword cultivator. This battle was unavoidable. Ha 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 ha. Very suddenly, just as Chen Zong was about to agree to the battle with Bailey Wu Yun, there was a disdainful laugh. I think you shouldn't be called Bailey Wu Yun. You should be called Bailey Wu Yen. Everyone was shocked. Who was it? Who was so daring to provoke Heaven's shocking sword like this? They even had the audacity to change his name to Bailey Faceless. This was a blatant slap to his face. Chen Zong was also shocked. Wisps of clouds filled the air, and a silhouette floated through the clouds, gracefully and nimbly. Yi Tianfeng, this has nothing to do with you. Bailey Wu Yun frowned slightly. Immediately, a cold look appeared on his face. His tone was low and cold. Yi Tianfeng, the flowing clouds of heaven, was a peerless genius like shocking sky sword Bailey Wu Yun. There were rumors that Yi Tianfeng and Bailey Wu Yun were not on good terms. Now, it seemed like that was the case. Haha, Bailey Faceless, you're at the limit of an 11-star level, yet you're so vicious to deal with at 10-star level. You're bullying the weak. I just can't stand your despicable behavior. Yi Tianfeng chuckled and said unhurriedly, if you have the ability, then use the name of a sword cultivator to challenge the Sword Emperor of Light. As long as you dare, I, Yi Tianfeng, will stay 100 miles away from you in the future. Yi Tianfeng's words made Bailey Wuyun frown. He was very angry. Challenging the Sword Emperor of Light was simply courting death. This was because the Sword Emperor of Light was an invincible heaven-rank powerhouse. His strength was extremely terrifying. Not to mention that he was only an 11-star, even if he was a 12-star, he would not be a match for the Sword Emperor of Light. Chapter 29:15. Because of Yi Tianfeng's interference, in the end, Bailey Wuyun was able to fight with Chen Zong as he wished. Taking advantage of this opportunity, he defeated Chen Zong and crippled him, allowing Bailey Yan's follow-up plan to succeed. When Bailey Wuyun left, he did not have the calm and unhurried look he had when he came. On the contrary, his expression was extremely cold, and the aura around him was filled with a shocking chill and killing intent. It made people not dare to look at him directly, and they could only feel chills all over their bodies. Bailey Yan's expression was also very ugly. Chen Zong looked deeply at Tantai Baimu. His eyes were very calm and very deep, but it made Tantai Baimu feel a chill, and his heart trembled. He was very clear about what he had done and what his goal was. Unfortunately, it did not work, and he did not get rid of Chen Zong. Next, he might face this person's revenge. In Sky Phoenix City, maybe he would not attack, but if he left Sky Phoenix City, he would definitely attack. Tantai Baimu was very sure. Go. Without hesitation, Tantai Baimu immediately left with his subordinate. He cherished his life very much. Logically speaking, at this moment, he should have left Sky Phoenix City, but this time, he came for the ancient Phoenix Goddess. If he could become a blazing Phoenix Guard, it would be much better than staying in Tianluo Palace. And as long as he was chosen by the ancient Phoenix Goddess, this Chen Zong was nothing to worry about. In fact, he was a member of Tianluo Palace. If he was willing, he could ask the stronger members of Tianluo Palace to directly suppress and kill Chen Zong. Yi Tianfeng left, and Chen Zong also left. Thank you, Brother Yi, for helping me out. Chen Zong bowed to Yi Tianfeng and thanked him. Haha, I just don't like Bailey Wuyun. Yi Tianfeng laughed, and the clouds around his body disappeared. His long hair flowed down, and he looked a little slovenly. He wore a gray martial arts suit, with the symbol of flowing cloud on the left side of his chest, and a reddish-brown gourd at his waist. Yi Tianfeng chuckled as he took the gourd from his waist. After opening it, a strong aroma of wine permeated the air, filling the air. Taking a big gulp of the strong wine, Yi Tianfeng's face flashed with an intoxicated look. The taste of this wine was something he enjoyed very much. Chen Zong, who had always been fond of wine, immediately concluded that it was a fine wine, a very strong aged wine. Awesome! Yi Tianfeng took another gulp and hung up the wine gourd again. Soon after, he said to himself, the earliest conflict between Bailey Wuyun and I was because of my title. Chen Zong thought for a while, and seemed to understand something. Yi Tianfeng's title was Sky Flowing Clouds, while Bailey Wuyun's name was Bailey, named Wuyun. There were no clouds within 100 miles. Didn't this mean that there were no clouds within 100 miles of where he was? Then, Yi Tianfeng would be the same as Bailey Wuyun offending him. Could it be that anyone whose name or title contained the word Yun would offend Bailey Wuyun? This reason sounded ridiculous, but Chen Zong thought for a while. Although it was the first time they met, but Chen Zong could see the general character of Bailey Wuyun. Chen Zong's guess was not wrong. Of course, Bai Li Wu Yun was not so arrogant as to think that anyone whose name or title contained the word Yun would offend him. It was just that at that time, when he met Yi Tianfeng, he was provoked by someone else, which led to the conflict. Even though the person who instigated the conflict was already dead, with his soul scattered and not even his bones remaining, the conflict between Yi Tianfeng and Bai Li Wu Yun remained. Furthermore, as time passed, it became more and more intense. Just now, Yi Tianfeng had provoked Bai Li Wu Yun to challenge the Radiance Sword Emperor. If he dared to do so, Yi Tianfeng would avoid Bai Li Wu Yun. As long as Bai Li Wu Yun was within a radius of 100 miles, Yi Tianfeng would not be able to see him. He would truly achieve the state where there were no clouds within 100 miles of Bai Li Wu Yun. Unfortunately, Bai Li Wu Yun did not dare to do so. After all, Bai Li Wu Yun was not stupid. Challenging the Guang Jiendi was no different from seeking death. The Guang Jiendi killed him in one strike. Even with the reputation of the Bailey clan, he would not be able to threaten the Guang Jiendi. I say you should change your title. Unparalleled sword or whatever, it's too easy to get into trouble. Yi Tianfeng walked forward leisurely as he said casually, otherwise, if we end up provoking those sword-sex sword emperors, it won't be good for us. In the inner universe, there was a sealed sky monument. Those who challenged the sealed sky monument and left their name on it would be able to obtain a title that belonged to them. It was a title that was recognized by the universe. The Guang Jiendi was the title on the sealed sky monument. After Yi Tianfeng left, Chen Zong also returned to the inn. The things that had happened today were not small, and it had touched Chen Zong quite a bit. The battle with Tantai Bai Mu and his servant, and the confrontation with Bai Li Wu Yun. If it was not for Yi Tianfeng's sudden appearance, Chen Zong would not have been able to avoid the battle with Bai Li Wu Yun. But that battle, Chen Zong was not confident. The threat that Bai Li Wu Yun gave him was too strong. The ancient mysterious world was a world that belonged to those with bloodlines. Only those with bloodlines could dominate. It was very difficult for those without bloodlines to surpass those with bloodlines in their cultivation. Of course, it was not impossible, but it was very rare. Tantai Bai Mu's wind of extinction bloodline was indeed very brilliant. Its power was shocking. Fortunately, he was only at the peak of the 10-star level. If he was at the peak of the 10-star level, after activating his bloodline, his battle strength would soar. Whether Chen Zong could defeat him again was unknown. He did not have any bloodline, but the third level of the God of Demons sword technique also brought him tyrannical power. In addition, his own cultivation was equivalent to the peak of the heaven rank, and Tantai Bai Mu was at the peak of the heaven rank. If his own cultivation broke through to the peak of the heaven rank, Chen Zong felt that his own battle strength should be able to break through the limit, break through the minor realm, and reach the 11th star level of the upper realm. Was that his own limit? No, it was not at all. In terms of swordsmanship, it could be further enhanced, and in terms of swordsmanship, it could be further perfected. The combination of all these was enough to push his battle strength to a higher level, the 12-star level, or even the so-called invincible level beyond the 12-star level. The sword was limitless. It must be pursued with all the effort of one's life, regardless of whether there was a limit to one's life. Suddenly, Chen Zong only felt his whole body tremble subconsciously, and there was a burst of enlightenment in his mind. It was as if he had seen through the fog and saw the light of the moon, so transparent and clear. Chen Zong's eyes were incomparably bright, and the wonderful feeling spread all over his body. It was an indescribable feeling, and countless inspirations emerged. The accumulation of the past, the outbreak of the crisis of life and death, the confusion when he first entered the inner universe, and the determination after defeating a strong enemy. All these things evolved and sublimated at this moment, bringing an indescribable wonderful feeling to Chen Zong, as if there were endless mysteries gushing out like spring water. He stood up, drew his sword, and with a flash of sword light, Chen Zong began to practice his swordsmanship in the not-so-spacious guest room of the restaurant. The power of cultivation was not infused into the swordsmanship, nor was it infused with essence, vital energy, and spirit. Similarly, the sword intent was not stimulated. Such a swordsmanship did not contain any powerful extraordinary power, but when it was executed by Chen Zong, every sword strike condensed a terrifying power. It was drawn but not released, but it was extremely shocking. It seemed that once it was released, its sharpness would be able to cut through everything. Chen Zong swung his sword again and again, as if he did not know what fatigue was, as if there was no end to it. He performed all the basic moves of swordsmanship, such as pointing, stabbing, flicking, slicing, chopping, and so on. Any superb swordsmanship could not be separated from the basic swordsmanship, which was the framework. It was like building a building. No matter how tall the building was, it could not be separated from the foundation. The taller the building was, the more solid the foundation was needed to carry it. Otherwise, it could not be built at all. Chen Zong first practiced the heart swordsmanship, then the world swordsmanship, then the no-kill swordsmanship, and finally the ancient swordsmanship. He practiced it over and over again, and in the end it became the basic swordsmanship. The basic swordsmanship was the foundation of all swordsmanship, and it could not be separated from it. Chen Zong closed his eyes and performed the basic swordsmanship again and again with the guidance of his mind. Unconsciously, the basic swordsmanship, which had not been improved for hundreds of years, seemed to be breaking through the bottleneck, breaking through the boundary of the current stage, and rising to a higher level. The sword was endless. The sword principle was endless. The sword principle was endless. However, that was the general direction. For an individual, there was an end, and that was where everyone's limit was. Chen Zong had never stopped practicing the basic swordsmanship. It was just that hundreds of years ago, the basic swordsmanship seemed to have been improved to the extreme. After hundreds of years, even if he did not stop practicing, he could only maintain that level and could not improve further. However, the continuous practice was not only to maintain the level, but also to accumulate bit by bit. When he accumulated to a certain extent, he would wait for the opportunity to appear. He did not expect that the opportunity would appear at this moment. First, it was a life and death crisis, followed by bewilderment, followed by determination, and then a challenge that made the future even clearer. The series of impacts shook Chen Zong's mind incessantly, causing him to be in a bumpy state like a small boat on the ocean. Until he saw a lighthouse that led the way so that he would not be lost in the dark sea. The light on it was so bright and warm, like the light of hope. All the confusion was swept away in an instant, replaced by warmth and determination. It was like the dawn. Low and sharp whooshing sounds suddenly rang out. It seemed very sudden, but also very natural. It was like a cool breeze blowing, like the sound of a tsunami in the distance. When it passed through the endless mountains and rivers, it had already become very soft. However, there was an amazing power contained in it. When people felt it carefully, they could not help but feel frightened. A seemingly invisible, yet seemingly visible aura grew on the sword edge and covered it. That power was not the power of Chen Zong's cultivation, nor was it the power of Chen Zong's essence, qi, spirit, or sword intent. It was a power that came out of nowhere. Chapter 29:16. The sun was setting in the west, and the sunset glow was as red as fire and blood. Outside the heavenly Phoenix City Lord's residence, it was very lively. There were lanterns and colored banners everywhere, and the lanterns were brightly lit. It was as if phoenixes were flying together, shining together with the sunset glow. With the City Lord's residence as the center, the city guards were distributed 10 miles away, sealing off the area and guarding it. Outside the city guards, many people had gathered. They were all here to watch the fun. Even if they couldn't get close to the city lord's residence and participate in the banquet, standing here made them feel as if they were participating in the banquet. The banquet held by the heavenly Phoenix City Lord's residence for the ancient Phoenix Divine Maiden was about to begin. This banquet was named Morning Phoenix Banquet. It was so grand that it wasn't as simple as a banquet. It was also related to the selection of the guards and even the Blazing Phoenix Guard. Because of this, the competition for the 10 name cards was so intense. But now, the dust was finally about to settle. The crowd surged, and suddenly, more than a dozen people strode over and squeezed through the crowd. Walking in the middle was a woman in green clothes, carrying 2 blades on her back. She looked so valiant that someone recognized her. Autumn Leaf Saber Who Die. The dozen people around her all had powerful auras. There were 8 stars, 9 stars, and even 2 10 stars. They were like guards protecting Autumn Leaf Saber Who Die, escorting her. Why was this so? Because Who Die had obtained a name card. With the name card in hand, she could participate in the Morning Phoenix Banquet. However, on the way, it was inevitable that she would be targeted by others, coveted, and even robbed of her name card. This was not impossible. The later it was, the crazier it would be. With more than a dozen people escorting her, 2 of them were 10 stars cultivators, and they were very intimidating. Under the escort of more than a dozen people, Who Die stepped into the circle of the city guards. From now on, she didn't have to worry about her name card being stolen. Who Die subconsciously breathed a sigh of relief. This period of time could be said to be lived in fear. Now, it was finally better and she could participate in the Morning Phoenix Banquet. The Blazing Phoenix Guards didn't have gender restrictions. Moreover, the ancient Phoenix Divine Maiden was someone he greatly admired. Being able to meet her was an extremely good thing. A figure concealed all of his presence as he silently moved through the crowd. He was extremely low-key, and it was difficult for him to attract anyone's attention. Soon, this person arrived at the area where the city guards had sealed off the entrance. He took out a name card from his bosom, and after passing the verification process, he stepped into the encirclement of the city guards. As soon as he entered the encirclement, he felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders, and he couldn't help but laugh heartily. One by one, the people holding the invitation cards were either escorted by the crowd or sneaked in stealthily. At this moment, an extremely powerful aura moved horizontally like an ancient mountain. As it moved, the void seemed to emit a rumbling sound. It was extremely shocking. The crowd was also pushed away by that shocking aura. They saw an extremely muscular figure walking towards them. Every step he took gave off the feeling of an elephant stomping on the ground. It was as if the entire street was shaking. This person was more than 2 meters tall. He had bronze-colored skin and wore a short robe. His muscles were bulging, and every muscle seemed to be made of steel. His eyes were like a tiger's, and they contained an astonishing power. A terrifying fluctuation of chi and blood was spreading out from his body, impacting the surrounding air and forcibly repelling it. That vigorous chi and blood was like a huge furnace that was burning fiercely. The aura that was released was extremely shocking. As soon as he appeared, it alarmed everyone in all directions. It made people feel as if they were close to an oven. Their bodies were blazing hot as if they were about to combust. Back off! Back off! One by one, they gave way to him. Divine Strength Vajra! He's here too. Rumor has it that he has also obtained a name card. Exclamations continued to ring out. This Divine Strength Vajra seemed to be a well-known figure. That's right. In the ancient Phoenix domain, the Divine Strength Vajra was a well-known expert with the combat strength of the limit of the 10-star level. His amazing record was that he could take 100 moves from an 11-star expert without being defeated. To be able to take 100 moves from an 11-star expert with the combat strength of the 10-star level was very amazing. After all, the gap between the 10-star level and 11-star level was very obvious. The reason why the divine strength Vajra could do this was because his bloodline was extraordinary. His divine power was self-generated, and he was also a body refiner. He could fully exert his divine power and display it to the extreme. Under the divine power, it was as easy as crushing dry weed. Experts with the same level of combat strength would find it difficult to break the defense of the divine strength Vajra and cause him harm. However, if they were hit by his divine power, they would be directly injured or even blown apart. No one dared to stop the divine strength Vajra because, according to the news, the divine strength Vajra had directly smashed a name card holder in the Phoenix Battle Arena to obtain the name card. He had also accepted 2 challenges to keep the name card. In those 2 challenges, one was killed and the other was injured. The one who died in a miserable state, and the one who was injured would not be able to recover without half a year to a year. His valiant record made people not dare to provoke him. Like a giant, he walked over and took the name card. After checking it, he stepped into the sealed area and walked towards the main gate of the city lord's mansion. His back view looked incomparably tall and strong, giving off a feeling that he could crush an army of 1,000. Not long after, another person walked over. He was wearing golden armor and holding a golden spear with dragon patterns. His eyebrows were like swords, and his eyes were as bright as the stars. His aura was astonishingly condensed. He walked with a majestic gait, as if he could challenge all the experts in the world with a single spear in his hand. Golden Dragon Spear. This was the person's title. This person was also an expert with the combat strength of the limit of the 10-star level. His Golden Dragon Spear technique was extremely tyrannical. It was sharp and overbearing. With a spear in hand, he could penetrate and destroy everything. He was invincible. One genius expert after another came. Chunzong also walked over with a name card and a long sword at his waist. The battle with Tantai Baimu proved that Chunzong's strength was powerful. He was at the limit of the 10-star level. The confrontation with the Heaven Sword Bailey Wun, although they did not fight because of Yi Tianfeng, Tian Luyun, but it also made Chunzong's reputation spread far and wide. The title of Chunzong's unparalleled sword was also spread and widely known. After that, another person came to challenge Chunzong. It was a sword cultivator with the combat strength of the 10-star level. In that battle, the sword cultivator tried to kill Chunzong. Instead, he was killed by Chunzong with a single sword strike. This further demonstrated Chunzong's illustrious reputation. Fame was earned through fighting. Challenges, temptations, promises, and so on. Chunzong experienced a lot in these 3 days. In the end, the name card was still in his hands. Now, Chunzong came with the name card to participate in the Morning Phoenix banquet. All eyes were fixed on Chunzong. That's him. Chunzong, who calls himself the Unparalleled Sword. Unparalleled sword, unparalleled among swords. What a big tone. Extremely arrogant, extremely ignorant. Voices continued to sound, and there was a lot of discussion. Chunzong was not affected in the slightest, and his expression did not change in the slightest. The unparalleled sword. In the outer universe, this was a representative, a model, and was recognized by the universe's will. You don't recognize it? Are you stronger than the universe's will? However, in the inner universe, the unparalleled sword was not recognized by the universe's will. It was not even recognized by the general public. In the end, it was indeed Chunzong who called himself that. Well, at least in the inner universe. He called himself unparalleled. Chunzong was not a high-profile person, and he was not a person who liked to be in the limelight. He only did this in order to find Yun Yanxin better. Yun Yanxin knew that his title in the outer universe was unparalleled. If she heard him use the unparalleled sword as his title, she would know who he was. He had to be prepared. In addition, in the depths of Chunzong's heart, there was something that even he was not aware of. It was a kind of fighting spirit, a fighting spirit to confront the strong, and a spirit to use the strong as a whetstone to hone his own fighting spirit. By using the name of the unparalleled sword, he would attract more strong opponents and save himself the trouble of looking for them one by one. Well, Chunzong wouldn't admit this, because even he himself wasn't aware of it. It was as if his subconscious had revealed itself. In any case, in short, the name of the unparalleled sword had been released, and it was impossible to take it back. Otherwise, it would tarnish his sword heart and destroy his path of swordsmanship. Therefore, he could only hold the sword and walk forward. He would kill anyone who stood in his way. As this thought flashed through his mind, Chunzong's footsteps became firmer and firmer. His figure became straighter and straighter, like the edge of a sword pointing to the sky. A surge of sword essence was surging, but it did not break out of his body. Instead, it kept surging inside Chunzong's body, as if it was being tempered thousands of times in a furnace. Finally, when Chunzong took the name card and stepped into the blockade, the sword essence also broke the original limit and rose to a stronger level. Chunzong's original understanding had allowed him to break through the limits of his basic swordsmanship and reach a new level. It had gradually begun to influence his sword will. Now, under the countless doubtful gazes and voices, his determination had been further strengthened. Finally, the quantitative change had led to a qualitative change. He had taken that step and broken through the limits, causing his sword will to break through. The moment the sword essence broke through, the crowd stared at Chunzong's back. It was as if they saw a huge illusory sword shadow soaring into the sky, but it also seemed like an illusion. One by one, they came with the name cards. Every one of them had gone through several challenges and various temptations. Finally, they came with the name cards to participate in the Phoenix banquet. Walking to the gate of the City Lord's mansion, which was decorated with lanterns and colored banners, he took the name card again and handed it to the butler of the City Lord's mansion, who had been waiting for a long time. "I wonder which heaven's pride is here?" The butler of the City Lord's mansion took a look at the name card. After confirming that it was a real name card and not a fake one, he looked at Chunzong with a smile, and his tone seemed to be somewhat respectful. "Unparalleled sword. Chunzong." Chunzong replied unhurriedly and even told him his name. "So it's Chun Tianjiao. Please come in." The butler was startled at first, but then he smiled. No matter what he was thinking, at least on the surface, it was impossible to tell. He still had a cordial look. As soon as the butler finished speaking, a tall and beautiful maid immediately walked over. After bowing to Chunzong, she led Chunzong into the City Lord's mansion. Chapter 29:17. Inside the Heavenly Phoenix City Lord's residence, the venue had already been set up. There were lanterns everywhere, and the flames in the lanterns burned brightly. Through the patterns on the lanterns, it looked as if a flaming phoenix was about to spread its wings and soar. The maids and attendants, who had been carefully dressed and dressed beautifully, moved about in an orderly manner. The banquet hall was located in the Phoenix Hall, the most spacious hall in the City Lord's residence. The beautiful maid led Chunzong to the Phoenix Hall with graceful step. Normally, the Phoenix Hall would not be opened. It would only be opened during important occasions to show its extraordinariness. The Phoenix banquet would be held in the Phoenix Hall. Unparalleled sword Chunzong has arrived. At the entrance of the Phoenix Hall, someone was responsible for announcing the arrival. The high-pitched voice, which sounded like a song, traveled into the hall and into the ears of many people. Who is it? Some people thought that they had misheard. Unparalleled sword, what a boastful person. Unparalleled in the sword. What does he think of all the powerful swordsmen? Everyone in the Phoenix Hall was stunned. Immediately, a figure stepped into the Phoenix Hall as straight as a sword. Everyone's eyes fell on him. Every gaze had a tangible feeling, as if they wanted to see through Chunzong. Chernzong's expression did not change. Everyone present was only at the heaven stage. Even if there were differences in combat strength, they were still at the heaven stage and had not surpassed it. With Chernzong's willpower, he would not flinch even in the face of the gaze of a saint-level master, let alone a group of heaven stage masters. The moment he stepped into the Phoenix Hall, Chernzong swept his gaze across and saw everything in the hall clearly. Set up. It was magnificent. The dome was a picture of a phoenix bathing in fire. With it as the center there were many patterns. Those patterns looked like birds, vivid and lifelike. It was a picture of 100 birds paying homage to the phoenix. 100 birds paying homage to the phoenix. Phoenix Hall. Phoenix Banquet. There seemed to be a special meaning to it. Then, was the ancient phoenix divine maiden compared to the phoenix, and the others who came to participate in the phoenix banquet were birds? Such an analogy. As the thought flashed through his mind, Chernzong did not say anything. Instead, he glanced at the group of people. Shocking Heaven's Sword Hundredly Wu Yun was staring at him with a terrifying gaze, as if he wanted to kill him. On the other hand, Flowing Clouds of Heaven Yi Tianfeng smiled at Chernzong. As for Boundless Ocean He Zhonghai, he glanced at Chernzong indifferently before retracting his gaze. He Zhonghai was not a swordsman, so Chernzong called himself the Peerless Sword. It had nothing to do with him, but he couldn't help but mock him in his heart. The others were a group of top prodigies, all of whom had the combat power of 11-star or 10-star. In the end, there were only 10 people who came through the invitation card. Other than that, there were also people with high authority in Heavenly Phoenix City, such as the commander and vice-commander of the Heavenly Phoenix City Guard. The City Lord has arrived. The sound of singing came from outside the door. It was very loud and resounding, and it directly entered everyone's ears. At the door, an old man wearing a luxurious robe walked in with a smile on his face. It was the Heavenly Phoenix City's City Lord. Greetings, all prodigies. The City Lord smiled and cupped his hands. Even though his combat power was extraordinary, and he had the combat power of the Heaven Realm, he did not become arrogant because of his strength and status. To put it bluntly, this was the world of cultivators, and strength mattered. Without strength, no matter how high one's status was, it was useless. The prodigies who were invited or came by their own invitation cards were not simple. They were all very talented, powerful, and had a bright future ahead of them. It was not impossible for them to reach the 11-star or 12-star level. Some of them even had a slight chance of entering the undefeatable realm. Giving a good attitude and leaving a good impression of being polite was always a good thing. Greetings, City Lord. No matter what the prodigy's temperament was or where they came from, at least they were invited. They all had to maintain their composure and return the greeting. No need to be so polite, the City Lord replied with a smile, looking very friendly. In the Phoenix Court specially built by the City Lord, 6 blazing Phoenix Guards were spread out in all directions, guarding everything. In the Phoenix Court, the Heaven Fire Phoenix was resting, and the Golden Phoenix carriage was parked at the side. Inside there were 3 figures. 2 of them were maids, the ancient Phoenix Divine Maiden's maids. They wore tight-fitting golden-red armor, which perfectly accentuated their tall and slender figures. The aura they exuded was very powerful and shocking. They were all Heaven Realm cultivators, and their auras were extremely terrifying. They were definitely elites with the combat power of the undefeatable realm. As for the ancient Phoenix Divine Maiden in the middle, her aura was incomparably deep, like the abyss of the sea. It was impossible to sense it. Goddess, someone actually calls himself the Unparalleled Sword. Isn't he afraid of being bitten by the wind? The maid on the left smiled. He's just trying to please the crowd. The maid on the right was cold. These 2 maids looked almost exactly the same. They were twins, and they were carefully cultivated by the ancient Phoenix Mountain since young. They were maids who specialized in serving the goddess. Their strength was very strong in the Heaven Realm. But their temperaments were different. Unparalleled sword. A hint of surprise seemed to appear in the ancient phoenix divine maiden's eyes. Goddess, it's your turn. The maid on the right didn't care about the unparalleled sword and reminded her instead. Let's go. The ancient phoenix divine maiden's tone was light. She stood up and walked out of the phoenix court. Outside the phoenix-facing hall, an incomparably sharp and resounding voice sounded directly as if it pierced through the clouds. It directly entered the ears of everyone in the phoenix-facing hall. She's here. Quickly go and welcome her. Everyone in the phoenix-facing hall seemed to become enthusiastic. The eyes of all the prodigies lit up, and they stared expectantly at the entrance of the phoenix-facing hall. There were even some prodigies who quickly rushed over to welcome her closer. Figures flashed, and someone stepped into the phoenix-facing hall. She's here. The first figures that came into view were wearing ardent phoenix armor. They were the 3 ardent phoenix guards. The 3 ardent phoenix guards stepped into the phoenix-facing hall in a semicircle. After passing by the 3 ardent phoenix guards, everyone's eyes became brighter. We welcome the arrival of the goddess. The heavenly Phoenix City Lord immediately bowed, and the officials of heavenly Phoenix City stood behind him. They bowed together with the heavenly Phoenix City Lord and shouted loudly, "Welcome, goddess!" The prodigies also bowed one after another, and their eyes were all shining. There was admiration and worship. The ancient Phoenix goddess was the goddess of the ancient Phoenix Mountain. She was the representative of the ancient Phoenix Mountain, and her status was lofty and extraordinary. Of course, that was not all. No matter how high one's status was, if one did not have the strength and potential to match it, it would be like a castle in the air, lacking a foundation. The ancient Phoenix goddess was a powerhouse, and she was evaluated as a monster. In other words, the ancient Phoenix goddess' future was astonishing. She could have the battle prowess of a heaven-rank powerhouse, which was an astonishing level that surpassed the 12-star level. In the entire inner universe, although there were many heaven-rank powerhouses, there were not many true heaven-rank powerhouses in the ultimate realm. And those who could surpass the ultimate realm were even rarer. Every one of them was famous in the ancient mystic world, and they were infamous for their fighting prowess. Of course, the current ancient Phoenix goddess had not yet grown to that level, and she had not yet become an invincible powerhouse. However, it was said that the ancient Phoenix goddess' current battle prowess was extraordinary, and she was at least at the level of an 11-star higher realm. As for whether she had reached the 12-star level of the ultimate realm, it was hard to say, because the ancient Phoenix goddess had very few opportunities to fight. Usually, when something happened, the ones who needed to fight were the ardent Phoenix guards and the 2 maids beside them. As long as the ardent Phoenix guards and the 2 maids fought, even a 12-star level Supreme Realm powerhouse would be defeated. Moreover, the status of the ancient Phoenix Divine Maiden was extraordinary, and it was extremely rare for there to be elites who would deliberately target her. In this way, the chances of the ancient Phoenix Divine Maiden personally making a move in battle were even rarer, and it also made it even more difficult for others to know what level her strength had reached. In short, she could be described as unfathomable. When the ancient Phoenix goddess stepped into the Phoenix Palace, Chernzong's eyes suddenly narrowed, and wisps of light gathered at the bottom of his eyes. He stared, wanting to see the ancient Phoenix goddess clearly. Previously, outside the city gate, the ancient Phoenix goddess was sitting in the golden Phoenix carriage, and was covered by the protective light of the golden Phoenix carriage, so he could not see clearly. Now there was no golden Phoenix carriage. However, Chernzong was disappointed, because the ancient Phoenix goddess's face was covered by a light red veil, and everything below her eyes was completely covered. The problem was that the veil seemed to be some kind of protection, causing the aura of the ancient Phoenix Divine Maiden to be unfathomable and unfathomable. It also caused her face to become blurry, and her eyes seemed to be covered by clouds and mist, making it difficult to see clearly. No matter who looked over, trying to see the ancient phoenix goddess's face clearly, they could not see clearly. It was as if it was covered by a layer of invisible power, and there was a hazy feeling like looking at flowers in the fog. The ancient phoenix goddess's eyes were level, and it was as if in an instant she was looking at everyone, but also as if she was not looking at anyone. This kind of feeling was very strange. Chernzong carefully observed the ancient phoenix goddess's eyes, and found that when the ancient phoenix goddess's eyes were fixed on him, there was no change, and it was completely the same as the way she looked at others. It really is not Nianxin. Chernzong could not help but secretly say, feeling as if a heavy burden had been lifted off his shoulders, and also an indescribable feeling of disappointment. Although from the beginning, Chernzong felt that Nianxin could not possibly be the ancient phoenix goddess, and at most, she was someone close to the ancient phoenix goddess, or she was acquainted with the ancient phoenix goddess, but in the depths of his heart, there was actually a small fluke that even he himself could not detect. That was, Nianxin was the ancient phoenix goddess. Of course, this kind of situation was almost impossible, and the probability was less than 1 in 100 million. Fluke was still fluke, and now it was finally confirmed that it was really a kind of fluke. No. Otherwise, the ancient phoenix goddess would not look at him the same way she looked at others. Thinking of this, Chernzong secretly shook his head, and felt that he was thinking too much. He also looked at the others, such as the 6 ardent phoenix guards and the 2 maids. They did not wear veils, but the ardent phoenix guards wore ardent phoenix helmets, and only their eyes were exposed. The faces of the 2 maids could be seen clearly, and it was also because of this that he was sure that it was not Nianxin. Now, I can only hope that the ancient phoenix goddess and Nianxin know each other, Chernzong secretly said. Chapter 29:18. With the arrival of the ancient phoenix goddess, the atmosphere in Morning Phoenix Hall became extremely lively. This banquet was specially organized for the ancient phoenix goddess. She was the main character, and everyone else was just there to serve as a foil. But even if they were foils, these people would gladly endure it. With the arrival of the goddess, the heavenly phoenix city lord announced the official start of the banquet. Immediately, from outside, there were servants of heavenly Phoenix City carrying exquisite plates. As if they had practiced this thousands of times, they lined up neatly like flowing water and stepped into Morning Phoenix Hall one after another. They paused in front of the exquisite tables that surrounded the hall, put down the plates in their hands, bowed slightly, and walked out of Morning Phoenix Hall. The aroma of the delicious food filled the air, mixing with the fragrance of the wine, and lingering in the spacious Morning Phoenix Hall. Not bad. Yi Tianfeng's eyes seemed to shine slightly as he stared at the delicious food and wine. Then, without waiting for the city lord to speak, he picked up the wine jug and poured himself a cup. The fragrance of the wine filled the air, making Yi Tianfeng's eyes even brighter. He couldn't help but pick up the cup. First, he brought it close to his nose and sniffed it carefully. His eyes unconsciously narrowed, and he looked intoxicated. Then Yi Tianfeng took a sip. The taste of the wine continued to burst under his taste buds, bringing with it an aged mellow taste that constantly attacked Yi Tianfeng's mouth. Good! After a while, Yi Tianfeng let out a long breath. This wine is the blaze brew that I obtained 100 years ago. I have kept it for 100 years. Now that it can appear at the goddess banquet and receive the recognition of all the geniuses, it is my honor. The heavenly Phoenix City Lord laughed. The banquet officially began with Yi Tianfeng's cup of wine. Since it was a banquet, wine and food were inevitable. Eating and drinking were inevitable, but no one was an ordinary person. Naturally, they wouldn't indulge in eating and drinking. The purpose of coming here was not for the so-called food and wine. It was just something to liven up the atmosphere and make the banquet not so monotonous. Chernzong himself was also a wine lover. Although he wasn't addicted to wine, Tasting wine was a rare relaxation and enjoyment for Chen Zong. Seeing the way Chen Zong drank, Yi Tianfeng immediately walked over with a white jade cup in his hand. "So you are a kindred spirit. A toast to Brother Yi." Chen Zong raised his glass. The ancient phoenix divine maiden didn't say anything, nor did she eat or drink. Her eyes slowly swept over the crowd, sizing them up. The two maids beside her were even more direct, sizing them up. It was as though they were observing them, carefully observing them. As for the 6 blazing phoenix guards, they were divided into 2 groups, standing on the left and right sides of the ancient phoenix divine maiden. After a short moment, the ancient phoenix divine maiden finally raised her wine cup, and spoke for the first time. "Thank you for everyone's praise. I am deeply honored." I don't dare. Goddess, you are too courteous." The various prodigies, city lords, and the others all raised their wine cups one after another. Some even stood up and said to the ancient phoenix divine maiden. The ancient phoenix divine maiden had referred to herself as a little girl, and had also said that she was deeply honored. However, no one really thought so. If they really thought so, then wouldn't they be far too stupid? Most likely, they wouldn't have been able to survive until now. That was a kind of self-modesty. If you took it seriously, then you wouldn't be far from death from stupidity. Chen Zong raised his wine cup as he continued to observe the ancient phoenix divine maiden. He still hadn't given up hope. With the ancient phoenix divine maiden taking the initiative to speak and propose a toast to everyone, it directly raised the atmosphere to one level. An even more intense level. The majority of the prodigies were all praising how outstanding the ancient phoenix divine maiden was and how peerless her beauty was. Some were more tactful, but some were very direct. Finally, He Zhanghai even made a suggestion. Just eating and drinking wasn't enough. Why not take this opportunity to show off in front of the ancient phoenix divine maiden, and let the various prodigies show off themselves? Regarding this, the ancient phoenix divine maiden didn't have any objections. Meanwhile, the heavenly phoenix city lord revealed a calm smile. Originally, this was one of the purposes of the banquet. He planned to first invisibly flatter the various prodigies when the time was right, and then make such a suggestion. He hadn't thought that this He Zhanghai's desire to show off was so strong that he even took the initiative to suggest it himself. This seemed to have a better effect than him saying it himself. After all, this was the ancient phoenix divine maiden. If he could perform well in front of the ancient phoenix divine maiden and display his unique ability and even charm, and if the ancient phoenix divine maiden took a fancy to him because of this, he could become her imperial bodyguard or even a blazing phoenix guard. In fact, he could even obtain the ancient phoenix divine maiden's favor, and ultimately win her heart. Which man hadn't had such a beautiful dream in his heart? If he could win her heart, that would really be a supreme harvest. Of course, it was actually better not to have such thoughts because the ancient phoenix divine maiden was the divine maiden of the ancient phoenix mountain. To a certain extent, she wouldn't find a Tao companion. When it really reached that step, who knew what kind of unforeseen event would happen? Thinking too much wouldn't help matters. Instead, it would only add to his troubles. However, there were indeed benefits to better showing off in front of the ancient phoenix divine maiden. As one of the 3 supreme prodigies present, He Zhanghai was also from a heaven-grade force. Naturally, he was more well-informed. In addition, he had deliberately made inquiries and so on, so he seized this opportunity to make a suggestion. This was the beginning of showing off. Hearing He Zhanghai's suggestion, the eyes of the various prodigies lit up. However, there were also some prodigies who secretly frowned. They actually didn't think of this point, and He Zhanghai actually brought it up first. Damn it, if not, the first one to show off in front of the ancient phoenix divine maiden would be them. As for showing off one's ability, there were many kinds of abilities. Admittedly, strength was very important, and could be said to be the most important. However, strength couldn't be the only thing. Sometimes, having strength but no brains would cause one to be miserably tricked by others, and ultimately die a miserable death. In short, strength was indispensable, but it wasn't the only thing. While having great strength, one also needed to match it in other aspects. Insight, logic, and so on. One didn't need to be a level above others. At the very least, one had to be on par with the average level. Brother Zhonghai's suggestion is very good, but there is a downside. Bailey Wuyun suddenly opened his mouth, causing He Zhonghai's eyebrows to twitch. He squinted his eyes and looked over. To show off one's ability, there is no doubt that fighting is the most direct way. Everyone's strength is not ordinary, and the weakest one is at least a 10-star battle strength. Once you fight, I'm afraid that it will cause a lot of damage to this place. In my opinion, why don't you all not use your cultivation strength, and only fight with your martial arts skills to see who's better? After he finished speaking, Bailey Wuyun revealed a slight smile. Normally, he gave off a cold feeling, but that was only relative. This was because not everyone could enter his eyes. Even if it was Yi Tianfeng or He Zhonghai, Bailey Wuyun didn't pay too much attention to them. This was because he felt that one day, he would be able to surpass them. However, facing a genius like the ancient phoenix divine maiden, that was a completely different story. No one cared about Bailey Wuyun's attitude, but they all started to think about the feasibility of Bailey Wuyun's suggestion. Was it feasible? It was feasible. If they didn't use their cultivation and other extraordinary powers, and only fought with their martial arts skills, everyone felt that they were very strong, and wouldn't be inferior to anyone else. Of course, the difference between a 10-star battle strength and an 11-star battle strength was obvious, but that was the difference in strength and the difference in skills. However, if they didn't use these factors, and only fought with their martial arts skills, they might win. If that's the case, it's a good idea, the ancient phoenix divine maiden said after thinking for a while. Bailey Wuyun instantly revealed a face full of smiles. This was the feeling of being acknowledged, and it made him feel an inexplicable sense of excitement. It surged out from his heart, like the water of a great river. However, He Zhonghai frowned slightly, and he was very unhappy. He was the one who made the suggestion, so the person who was acknowledged by the divine maiden should be him, and not Bailey Wuyun, no, Bailey Faceless. As expected of Bailey Faceless, he looked cold on the outside, but in reality, he was a sinister person. Since this suggestion was made by me, then I'll be the first one. Who wants to fight with me? Bailey Wuyun was like a victorious rooster, and he had a valiant and high-spirited look, which was completely different from what he had seen in the Battle Phoenix arena, which made Chen Zong secretly surprised. However, Chen Zong could understand the change in Bailey Wuyun after thinking about it. Changed from arrogance to respect. That's what he meant. After Bailey Wuyun finished speaking, a sharp light flashed in his eyes, and he immediately looked around, sweeping past the faces of all the geniuses, as if he was provoking them. When he saw Chen Zong, he paused for a moment, and the light in his eyes became more and more intense, as if it was about to materialize and pierce through Chen Zong. There was even a faint smile at the corner of his mouth, with a hint of mockery, as if he was provoking Chen Zong to make the first move. Chen Zong didn't pay attention to Bailey Wuyun. I've long heard that Brother Bailey Wuyun's sword skills are amazing, but because of the difference in battle power, I didn't dare to say anything. Now that this is a rare opportunity, I, Silver Moonblade, will show you. At that moment, a young man with a long blade on his back stepped out, his eyes sharp and bright. First, he glanced at the ancient phoenix divine maiden, then looked at Bailey Wuyun. He also looked like a valiant rooster, and in the next moment, he pulled out the long blade on his back, and a faint sound of the blade rang out, startling everyone. A top genius, Silver Moonblade? Bailey Wuyun's face returned to its original cold and arrogant look, and there was a faint smile at the corner of his mouth. Then, show me your blade. Excuse me. As soon as Silver Moon Blade finished speaking, he suddenly took a step forward, as if he was gliding on water. The bright blade in his hand suddenly trembled, and instantly slashed out horizontally, as if a silver crescent moon had suddenly lit up, dazzling and eye-catching. But this blade was indeed just a blade technique, without the power of cultivation, and without the infusion of blade intent. In short, there was no extraordinary power to speak of, it was purely a blade technique, a superb blade technique. Silver Moonblade was a top genius, and although his battle power was only at the 10-star level, he would definitely break through the 10-star level and reach the 11-star level soon, so his blade technique was naturally very outstanding. When the blade was slashed out, it was like a silver crescent moon in the sky, and that trace of sharpness was extremely shocking. Bailey Wuyun's eyes narrowed slightly, and his right hand landed on the hilt of his sword, and the sharp sword was unsheathed. Chapter 29:19. The light from the blade was like a silver moon in the sky. It was bright and sharp with a touch of coldness. Bailey Wuyun unsheathed his sword, and an ear-piercing sword hum exploded in an instant. An extremely dazzling sword light broke through the air in an instant, and that sword light was extremely powerful. Even without the power of cultivation and the integration of the martial way divine intent, it still had an extremely shocking power. He unsheathed his sword and slashed forward. The moment the ray of sword light and the silver moon blade collided, an ear-piercing sound was heard. It transformed into invisible waves that rolled in all directions. After Bailey Wuyun unsheathed his sword, he immediately counterattacked. One sword after another, he continuously slashed forward, displaying his shocking sword techniques and attacking power. The most famous technique of the Bailey clan was, of course, the Bailey Flying Sword technique. However, the Bailey Flying Sword technique belonged to the Flying Sword technique. It was best used at a certain distance to display its full power. If it was close combat, though the Flying Sword technique could display a great amount of power, it was not complete enough. Within the Bailey clan, other than the famous Flying Sword technique, there were also other sword techniques that were suitable for close combat. As the number one of the younger generation of the Bailey clan, Bailey Wuyun not only mastered the famous flying sword technique of the Bailey clan, he also mastered a sword technique that was suitable for close combat. Close combat sword techniques and flying sword techniques could be used at the same time. They could be used at both close and far range. However, the current rules forbade the use of cultivation and martial will. The use of the flying sword technique required the use of cultivation. If not, how could it become a flying sword? Therefore, Bailey Wuyun could only use his sword techniques for close combat. The group of Heaven's favorites stared at the battle between the Silver Moon Blade and the startling Sky Sword. Sword techniques and sword techniques clashed continuously. It was obvious that the startling Sky Sword had the upper hand. His swordsmanship was extremely domineering. Every sword had a shocking power, and it cut through everything. The Silver Moon Blade was forced to retreat, and could only barely hold on. Everyone could see that it was only a matter of time before he was defeated. One strike. Shocking Heaven Sword Bailey Wuyun suddenly raised his sword and slashed down. It was as if the sky was about to shatter. It was just a simple sword technique, but it was extremely terrifying. It directly sent the Silver Moon saber flying. The saber in his hand trembled incessantly, and the arm holding the saber went numb. A terrifying force kept attacking, and the saber in his hand almost flew out of his hand. As expected of the shocking Sky Sword, your swordsmanship is shocking. I've lost. Silver Moon Blade did not act shamelessly. He took a deep breath, sheathed his blade, and cupped his hands towards Bailey Wuyun. Your blade technique is not bad either. Bailey Wuyun smiled as if he had won. Soon after, Bailey Wuyun retreated to one side, and did not continue to issue a challenge. although he very much wanted to do so, and use his own tyrannical swordsmanship to sweep through the entire field, become the focus of everyone's attention, be favored by the ancient phoenix divine maiden, and then be taken in as a burning phoenix guard, Bailey Wuyun still restrained himself. If he did that, of course, he could become the focus of attention, but it might also leave a bad impression. For example, if he was too eye-catching, the ancient phoenix divine maiden might not like such a person. After thinking about it, Bailey Wuyun decided to retreat to one side and let the others show off. After all, he had already been in the limelight for a while, and he should give the opportunity to others. Besides, Bailey Wuyun also had an idea, and that was to let the others show off a bit, and then wait for the crucial moment to make a move, and then give a fatal blow to the person who was in the limelight the most, and defeat him. This way, he would not be too outstanding, and he could still show off to the extreme. Killing two birds with one stone, why not? Bailey Wuyun almost laughed out loud, but his face maintained a cold and arrogant look from start to finish. I am the Golden Dragon Spear Zhao Ziming, who wants to compete with me? Zhao Ziming held the Golden Dragon Spear in his hand, and walked out with a dignified appearance. His eyes shone brightly, and he looked disdainfully in all directions, as if he was an invincible warrior who had swept through the battlefield. Golden Dragon Spear Zhao Ziming, an expert with the combat power of the 10-star Extreme Realm, was a newly risen Sky Pride, and he had obtained one of the 10 invitations to participate in the banquet. Sky Prides, top Sky Prides, and exceptional Sky Prides, they were never the same. At the beginning, most of them would be evaluated as Sky Prides, but if their performance became more outstanding, and they let others know that their talent and potential were extraordinary, and they had the potential to break through to the 11-star Extreme Realm in a short period of time, they would be re-evaluated as top Sky Prides, and the same was true for exceptional Sky Prides. So, where did this evaluation come from? In the ancient Xian world of the inner universe, there was an extremely mysterious force called Tai Xian. No one knew where Tai Xian was located, and no one knew how many people there were in Tai Xian, but it was publicly acknowledged that Tai Xian was very authoritative. Tai Xian, this mysterious force, had never participated in any of the disputes in the ancient Xian world, but they seemed to be everywhere, and all secrets seemed to be exposed by Tai Xian. Perhaps, an old farmer walking past you on the street could be a member of Tai Xian. The evaluation of geniuses and Sky Prides was issued by Tai Xian, and it would be issued once in a while. Of course, before Tai Xian issued an authoritative evaluation, others would also give a non-authoritative evaluation. For example, a newcomer who had just shown his talent and showed extraordinary strength would be given the most standard evaluation. For example, Chen Zong seemed to belong to the younger generation, and he was at the 10-star Extreme Realm, so he would naturally be evaluated as a Sky Pride. As for what level he would be at after Tai Xian announced it, it would be known at that time. Zhao Ziming, the Golden Dragon Spear, was a Sky Pride who had been evaluated by Tai Xian. This was the first evaluation, and if his performance was good enough, he might be at the level of top Sky Prides in the next evaluation. Zhao Ziming stood with his spear on the ground, and his posture was vigorous. His eyes flickered as he glanced across. With a bang, the entire hall trembled as though it was about to collapse. Everyone's countenance changed as they saw a figure as tall as a mountain step out, walking towards Zhao Ziming. "Let me." A dull voice sounded like it was from a huge bronze bell, with a shocking power. Zhao Ziming's expression changed. Divine Strength Vajra. The person who walked out was the Divine Strength Vajra. It gave people the feeling that it was an iron tower, and it was so heavy that people suspected that it was not the body of a human, but the body of some kind of beast. It was very terrifying. Zhao Ziming's eyelids twitched unconsciously. He had heard of the Divine Strength Vajra's reputation, and its battle record was even more impressive than his. Many people thought that the divine strength Vajra would be evaluated as a top sky pride in the next evaluation by Tai Xian. However, he could not be afraid. Since he had stepped forward first, there was no reason for him to retreat before he even made a move. Moreover, if he did not use his extraordinary powers and only relied on his martial arts skills, the other party might not be his match. My golden dragon spear is very sharp, be careful. Zhao Ziming stared at the divine strength Vajra, and the light in his eyes became more and more condensed. The trace of hesitation also disappeared. My fist is very strong, you have to be careful too. The divine strength Vajra stared at Zhao Ziming and said very seriously. Taking a step forward, the long spear in Zhao Ziming's hand suddenly leaped up and broke through the air. The spear pierced out and turned into a golden light, carrying astonishing power as it directly blasted towards the divine strength Vajra. This spear, as the dragon patterns fluctuated, it was as if a golden dragon had crossed the sky. In the face of this spear, the divine strength Vajra did not dodge. Instead, he revealed a smile and suddenly punched out. The fist broke through the air and shattered everything. As soon as it appeared, it gave people an extremely terrifying feeling, as if it could shatter everything. The divine strength Vajra's bloodline was extraordinary, and he was born with an extremely tyrannical physique. He was also a body refiner, and the cultivation technique he cultivated was extraordinary. It was compatible with his bloodline and vividly displayed his advantages. One punch. Such a simple and very direct punch caused everyone's expression to change drastically. The pressure brought by that punch was extremely tyrannical. Zhao Ziming's spear technique was extremely superb. It was indeed very tyrannical and also very exquisite. In comparison, the divine strength Vajra's fist technique was more ordinary. It was straightforward and lacked any changes, and it could not be said to be a superb technique. However, it was a force to be reckoned with. Coupled with his tyrannical physique and defensive power, it could sweep through everything. It was straightforward, one punch after another, bombarding out unreasonably. Along the way, it shattered the spear radiance, causing Zhao Ziming to feel extremely pressured and powerless. His spear technique was extraordinary, but it was difficult to break through the opponent's defense. Instead, under the extremely tyrannical attack of the opponent's fists, he retreated step by step. Then, he was sent flying with a punch and was directly defeated. Blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. Even Zhao Ziming felt that his sternum was about to be shattered. Terrifying. Too terrifying. The group of geniuses were all shocked. The divine strength of the divine strength Vajra was simply terrifying. It was as if he was invincible, but his body was extremely tyrannical. It was not that he had activated extraordinary strength, but it was just his body. Who wants to fight? The divine strength Vajra liked to fight. After a round, it was still not satisfied. A pair of bull eyes suddenly swept across, threatening as it issued a challenge. Everyone was silent. Under the situation where one did not use extraordinary strength, it was impossible to break through the divine strength Vajra's tyrannical defense. It was also difficult to resist the divine strength Vajra's tyrannical fists. Its power was unparalleled, as if it was invincible. Bailey Wuyun suddenly felt that his teeth were sore. If the divine strength Vajra was in the limelight, could he defeat his mother? Thinking about it, he did not have much confidence. His sword technique could not break through the opponent's defense, but if he was hit by the opponent's fist, he would most likely not be able to withstand it. Brother Chen, you call yourself unparalleled sword. Your sword technique must be very strong. Why don't you show it to everyone? Suddenly, another voice sounded. The one who spoke was Tantai Baimu. He did not know what method he used, but he finally obtained a name card to participate in the banquet. Now, it seemed that he was complimenting Chenzong, but in fact, he was secretly dealing with Chenzong. Tantai Baimu's words suddenly caused everyone's eyes to gather on Chunzong, waiting to see how he would choose. Unparalleled sword, what a big tone! The divine strength Vajra stared at Chunzong and said in a muffled voice, "Do you dare to fight with me?" Chapter 29-20. All eyes were fixed on Chunzong. Avoiding the battle? Accepting the challenge? That's what I want. Chunzong showed a faint smile. He did not avoid the battle. Instead, he took a step forward and walked toward the super-powered Vajra. Everyone was stunned and a little surprised. After all, the super-powered Vajra had shown extraordinary abilities. No one was willing to fight with him, mainly because they were not sure that they could defeat him. Originally, they thought that Chunzong would also avoid the battle. They did not expect that he would accept the challenge. It was completely unexpected. Good! The God Power Vajra immediately roared, releasing his fighting spirit. He suddenly raised his right arm, and like a strong bow being drawn, his muscles bulged, releasing waves of terrifying sounds, as if the bowstring was being pulled taut. Every muscle contained an extremely tyrannical power, as if a volcano was about to erupt. Large tendons also bulged on the surface of his muscles, like dragons and snakes entrenched themselves. A tyrannical aura then spread out, rushing in all directions and creating layers of ripples. This was not some transcendent power, but pure physical strength. It was extremely tyrannical. This punch alone was terrifying, as if it could shatter stone tablets and shatter stone. With a boom, an ear-piercing sound exploded. Without using any extraordinary power, this punch did not exceed the speed of sound, but it was still very fast. The most important thing was the power contained in this punch. It was a very terrifying power, a power that could destroy everything in its path. After the punch was thrown, Chunzong's expression changed slightly. It was extremely dignified, very strong. Chunzong had to admit that the super-powered Vajra's strength was indeed amazing. The pure physical strength without the use of extraordinary strength was so powerful that it was directly superior to his own. Under the tyrannical power, this punch also brought along an extremely terrifying fist pressure. It directly pressed down, causing Chunzong to involuntarily feel a sense of suffocation. Chunzong's figure was extremely agile. In between his short steps, he also unsheathed his sword in an instant, with a flash of cold light. In just an instant, they landed on the divine power Vajra's fist like stars, but they were all shattered by the terrifying fist force. However, the sword was not useless. The angle of the punch was unconsciously shifted, and it did not hit Chunzong. Chunzong's figure flashed, and the sword light rose again. Like a shooting star, it pierced the divine strength Vajra's body directly. The sound of metal clashing rang out as sparks flew. Chunzong's expression involuntarily changed. Such a sword attack was actually unable to pierce through the other party's body. The other party's defense was truly too shocking. Moreover, it was a defense under normal conditions, and not a defense with extraordinary power. He was as firm as King Kong. In the face of Chunzong's attack, the divine strength Vajra had no intention of dodging. He turned around and suddenly swung his arm horizontally. Like a thick steel whip, it directly rolled up a terrifying whistling sound, as if it wanted to smash Chunzong into pieces, but it missed. Chunzong's figure was extremely agile. He avoided the divine strength Vajra's strong attack. The divine strength Vajra's expression was cold. His arms bulged and his muscles swelled. Filled with astonishing power, he punched repeatedly. His fists were like falling meteorites, and also like a violent storm, mercilessly bombarding Chunzong. It was as if he wanted to smash Chunzong into pieces. One punch after another, it made everyone's expression change greatly. Especially Zhao Ziming, the Golden Dragon's spear, who had been defeated in this way before. Then what about Chunzong? How long could he hold on? Yes, everyone thought that in the face of the divine strength Vajra's extremely unreasonable and violent attacks, he could only passively hold on, unless he could resist his attacks and break through his amazing defense. Obviously, it was very difficult to do so without using extraordinary strength. In the face of the divine strength Vajra's extremely violent attacks, Chernzong's feet were extremely agile. He took small quick steps, his body was like a fish in the water, and also like a goshawk in the sky. He was extremely agile and sharp. All the fist shadows missed. From the side, a flash of sword light came again and hit the divine strength Vajra once again. However, it was still unable to break through his defense. Chernzong's speed was very fast, his figure was very agile, and his swordsmanship was superb. If it were another opponent, perhaps he would have been defeated. However, he was facing the divine strength Vajra, a terrifying opponent who was born with divine strength and a strong body with unparalleled defense. His unreasonable way of pushing was extremely difficult to deal with. Admit defeat. The divine strength Vajra roared. He turned his body, bringing a terrible storm, and suddenly attacked Chernzong. However, he missed again, which made him very angry. Why was he dodging like a little mouse? A real man should meet force with force. However, Chernzong just did not want to meet force with force. There was no need for that. This was a battle to determine who was better. It was not a competition of strength. This guy's swordsmanship is really powerful. With such swordsmanship, no wonder he dares to call himself the unparalleled sword. Well, it's just not bad. The unparalleled sword is too arrogant. The group of Heaven's Prides secretly thought. Brother Chen, although your swordsmanship is good, to say that it is unparalleled is too much. Tantai Bai Mu's voice sounded again. He seemed to be concerned about Chernzong, but there was a hint of sarcasm in his voice. It had to be said that Tantai Bai Mu was very cheap. His idea was also very simple. Anyway, he had already been enemies with Chernzong. So, after he had tricked him once, he could continue to trick him until he was dead. Then, he would not be able to find trouble with him. As for being hated by Chernzong, he did not care. Chernzong did not pay attention to Tantai Bai Mu. His mind turned and he made a decision. Standing still, facing the two fists of the divine power Vajra, facing the terrible storm of fists, Chernzong looked calm. He raised the heavenly will sword and then the sword was pushed horizontally. This sword looked ordinary and very slow, making people unable to understand Chernzong's intention. Did he intend to meet force with the divine power Vajra? Had he been provoked to madness? Idiot, Tantai Bai Mu muttered, his face full of ridicule. The sword was pushed horizontally, as if carrying the weight of a mountain. On the face of the divine power Vajra, there was a touch of ecstasy. The dozens of fist shadows disappeared directly, and directly turned into one fist. It was an incomparably heavy and violent fist, like a meteorite carrying earth-shattering and terrifying power, directly bombarding. This was the full strength of the divine power Vajra's punch, and it was the strongest punch without using extraordinary strength. However, with the divine power Vajra's tyrannical physique and innate divine strength, the power of this punch was extremely terrifying, and it was not difficult to shatter fine steel. However, Chernzong chose to meet force with force, which was unexpected, but also made people gasp. Was he not courting death? The sword that was pushed horizontally had a kind of majestic momentum like a mountain. The moment it collided with the fist of the divine power Vajra, Chernzong immediately felt a shocking force bombarding him, like a flood bursting a dike, like a volcanic eruption, rampaging and destroying everything. However, Chernzong's sword that was pushed horizontally turned in an instant, and the high-speed rotation in an instant dissipated a part of the terrifying power of the fist. Then, like fine steel turning soft, the sword light wrapped around the fist of the divine power Vajra like a spirit snake, and quickly spread to the arm. In addition to the entanglement, it also constantly dissipated the terrible impact of the divine power Vajra's fist. The divine power Vajra's face suddenly changed, and he only felt that his full-strength punch seemed to have hit a swamp, and there was a feeling of sinking deeper and deeper, as if there was no strength at all, and the emptiness made him feel very uncomfortable. The faces of the people around changed, and they were surprised by the sword that Chen Zong displayed. When an expert made a move, one would know whether or not he was a real expert. With such a sword, the change between hardness and softness was natural and smooth. The surrounding sword light approached the divine power Vajra, and directly hit his chest. The end of the sword light was in a trance for a moment. It was a vibration, a high-frequency vibration. One sword seemed to be dozens or hundreds of swords. The divine power Vajra's amazing defense blocked the sword tip, but under the high-frequency vibration of the sword tip, it was immediately broken. The sword tip broke through, and the terrible sword's strength went straight to the heart, causing the divine power Vajra's face to change greatly. He felt a terrible sword strength madly rushing into his heart, as if it was going to break his heart. However, Chen Zong withdrew his sword, and the long sword returned to its scabbard. The divine power Vajra stared at Chen Zong with an extremely dignified expression. He breathed heavily, and his eyes became wider and wider. He was incomparably fierce, and a tyrannical aura also spread from his body, as if it was going to explode completely. Chen Zong looked at him without fear. "Do you still want to fight?" The atmosphere became more and more cold and bleak. After a few breaths, the divine power Vajra's breathing gradually calmed down. He turned around and walked away, which was considered as admitting defeat. After all, the opponent's sword broke through his defense, which meant that the opponent had the ability to hurt him. However, his tyrannical punch was unable to hurt Chen Zong. At least in this way, it was clear who was better and who was worse. Of course, if it was a life-and-death battle, of course, he would not let it go so easily. But now it was just a contest. If he did not admit defeat, it would give people the feeling that he could not afford to lose. The divine power Vajra was born with divine strength, and he liked to solve problems with his fists, but it did not mean that he was brainless and had no dignity. The opponent's swordsmanship was superb and could break through his defense. So what if he took a step back? However, he was unwilling to admit defeat, so he could only turn around and leave silently. It had to be said that this battle had indeed exceeded everyone's expectations. Originally, everyone had thought that Chen Zong would be able to last for a long time under the violent attacks of the divine power Vajra. However, they had never expected that Chen Zong would actually gain the upper hand and injure the divine power Vajra, causing him to retreat. Chen Zong stood in the field, his eyes containing a trace of light, sweeping across, and finally fixed on Tantai Bai Mu's face. "Tantai Bai Mu, come out." Chen Zong's words also sounded, neither slow nor fast, appearing to be indifferent, but he directly called out his name. Coupled with Chen Zong's disdainful eyes, it was as if he was pointing at Tantai Bai Mu's nose and telling him to come out and die. In an instant, an embarrassed look appeared on Tantai Bai Mu's face, which turned into anger. It was a feeling of shame and anger, as if he had been insulted. Without hesitation, Tantai Bai Mu directly walked out. A warrior can be killed, but not humiliated. Since he felt humiliated, then he had to bear his anger. Chapter 29-21. Just now, when Tantai Bai Mu had tricked Chen Zong, he had been very happy. But now, Chen Zong had forced him to come out. If he refused, it would seem very low class and he would be looked down upon. He had no choice but to fight. However, although he had lost to Chen Zong in the Phoenix battle arena, his battle strength was only at the peak of the 10-star level, while Chen Zong was at the limit of the 10-star level. There was a difference. Tantai Baimu had always thought that he would lose, and he would lose because of the difference in battle strength. Now it was not about battle strength, but only a confrontation of martial arts. He would not lose, even if Chen Zong had shown superb swordsmanship. Chen Zong looked calm, and his eyes were as calm as a deep pool, making people unable to see through his inner thoughts. Tantai Baimu closed his folding fan, and his expression became solemn. There was a faint glimmer of light in his eyes. He secretly made up his mind that he must teach Chen Zong a lesson, a deep and ruthless lesson. If it were not for the fact that it was not easy to kill here, he would have directly killed Chen Zong. Brother Chen, draw your sword, and display your so-called unparalleled swordsmanship. At this time, Tantai Baimu still revealed a light smile, as if he was teasing him, even if his heart was filled with hatred for Chen Zong. If I draw my sword, you will lose. Chen Zong replied neither too fast nor too slow. There was a kind of certainty in his tone that made people stunned. It also made Tantai Baimu's expression unconsciously change. Arrogance, this tone was simply too arrogant to the extreme. Intolerable. Even if he did not use extraordinary power, Tantai Baimu's speed was very fast, as if his body was being pushed by a gust of wind, lightly but very quickly flying out, approaching Chen Zong. The folding fan in his hand was like a sharp blade breaking through the air, directly piercing through everything. This strike was light and flexible, with a feeling of difficult to distinguish and difficult to follow. It was profound and unfathomable. Only this strike showed Tantai Baimu's superb martial arts. In an instant, the attack suddenly changed as it neared Chen Zong. It split into 2, 2 into 4, and 4 into 8. There were a total of 8 attacks, all of which were aimed directly at Chen Zong. Each attack was so lifelike that it was difficult to distinguish the real one from the fake. It gave Chen Zong the feeling that the 8 attacks had the same aura, as if they all possessed extraordinary power. It was a very clever technique. If he had used his cultivation power, it would not have been a big deal. On the contrary, it would have been easier. However, if he did not use any extraordinary power and only relied on pure martial arts, it would be extraordinary. Although this Tantai Baimu always tricked him, Chen Zong had to admit that the other party did have a trick up his sleeve. He did not dodge. Tantai Baimu was not the divine strength King Kong. He did not have that kind of terrifying power that could sweep everything away. Only in terms of martial arts skills, Chen Zong was not inferior. Sword draw. This sword directly integrated some of the mysteries of the sword drawing technique. The moment the sword was drawn, it burst forth with an astonishing power. The sword broke through the air. With a slight shake of Chen Zong's wrist, the sword light also split into 8 in an instant, breaking through Tantai Baimu's attack. Then, the 8 sword lights quickly condensed into one, filled with a terrifying sharpness, piercing through everything. Tantai Baimu's expression suddenly changed. In front of him, there was only a dazzling sword light blooming, approaching like lightning, constantly magnifying in his eyes. He could not dodge. That sword light pierced through the stars and broke the moon, crossing the sky. It was impossible to dodge. Tantai Baimu used his body movement to the extreme. His body seemed to be blown by the wind. In an instant, he changed his position more than a dozen times. However, he found that no matter how he changed his position, he could not escape from the other party's sword. Unless he exploded his cultivation and strengthened his body movement, he could do it. But if he really exploded his cultivation, he would lose. What to do? At the same time as he changed his position, the folding fan in Tantai Baimu's hand suddenly opened, sprinkling out fan-shaped rays of light that overlapped and circled in front of him, as if forming a shield, attempting to resist Chen Zong's extremely mysterious sword attack. Under the overlapping fan-shaped rays, they were broken, but in the end, they resisted Chen Zong's sword attack. But Tantai Baimu had a feeling of horror. When he was watching from the sidelines, He felt that Chen Zong's swordsmanship was indeed superb. When they had fought on the Phoenix fighting arena, because they had mainly relied on cultivation and secret techniques, there had not been so many exchanges of martial arts. But now, a pure exchange of martial arts, a direct confrontation, let Tantai Bai Mu know how superb Chen Zong's swordsmanship was. The so-called peerless seemed to have some reason. When this thought flashed, Tantai Bai Mu's movements were not slow. He immediately floated back, his body like a light wind, as if he was weightless. He directly pulled away from Chen Zong. Move. Tantai Bai Mu chose a guerrilla warfare, constantly moving around, not giving Chen Zong a chance to close in. Without using cultivation, Chen Zong's swordsmanship could not attack from a distance. As long as he could not close in, he could only eat dust. Chen Zong did not move. His sword returned to its scabbard, standing in the same place, his breath restrained, becoming extremely deep. His eyes closed, and he did not intend to pursue Tantai Bai Mu. Could he not catch up? Not necessarily. But Chen Zong did not want to chase. Could it be that you deliberately ran like this, relying on your flexibility and speed? I have to chase you? Chen Zong did not fall into Tantai Bai Mu's calculations. He saw that Chen Zong was motionless, his sword had returned to its scabbard, and his eyes were closed. He had no intention of chasing him. Tantai Bai Mu moved around, sometimes approaching Chen Zong, sometimes pulling away. He knew very well that Chen Zong was waiting for him to get close, and then directly pull out his sword to attack. His swordsmanship was terrifying. Then, he would not let the opponent succeed. Chen Zong closed his eyes, but raised his perception to the extreme. This was his normal perception. To defeat the opponent, Chen Zong would not cheat. That would be an insult to himself. 1 breath, 2 breaths, 3 breaths. Time passed slowly. Tantai Bai Mu did not completely close in on Chen Zong, but constantly moved around, relying on his flexible body. In the blink of an eye, 20 breaths had passed. Tantai Bai Mu seemed to seize the opportunity, quickly approaching Chen Zong. For the first time, he was even closer. But at that moment, when he was about 5 meters away from Chen Zong, Tantai Bai Mu strangely did not approach, but instead floated back. Chen Zong's closed eyes suddenly opened, emitting a sharp cold light, staring at him. Not good. Tantai Bai Mu's mind could not help but tremble, instinctively feeling that something was wrong. In the blink of an eye, Chen Zong exploded, as if the power that had been accumulated for a long time was released in an instant. His calves suddenly swelled, trampling on the ground, and his whole person directly turned into a bolt of lightning, flying across the sky. Fast. In that instant the speed was extremely fast. 5 meters, in just a moment, Chen Zong had crossed over, and the long sword hanging at his waist was also unsheathed. Man and sword as one. Pulling out the sword moved to kill. The superb and direct swordsmanship was fully displayed, flying across the sky to kill. Could not dodge. Tantai Bai Mu was extremely horrified. He found that facing Chen Zong's sword, he could not avoid it. The eyes of the group of Heaven's Prides lit up, because in that moment, Chen Zong's grasp of the timing was too accurate. Just as Tantai Bai Mu was trying to close in and escape, it was a completely unexpected attack. Stunned. Tantai Bai Mu was stunned for a moment, but he still had to react. However, Chen Zong's grasp of the timing was too accurate to the extreme. What to do? The power contained in that sword was too terrifying, as if it was going to penetrate him. There was no way to dodge and no way to resist. The opponent may not dare to kill him, but to injure him, such as a sword piercing through his body, he would definitely not be lenient. Just as Chen Zong's sword was about to pierce through Tantai Bai Mu's body, Tantai Bai Mu exploded. After hesitating, he made up his mind. No matter what, he could not die, nor could he be injured. He could only explode with his cultivation. With one move, a strong storm immediately rolled up, and his speed increased by more than 10 times in an instant, directly avoiding Chen Zong's sword. Tantai Bai Mu's eyes suddenly emitted an incomparable murderous intent. Not only did he not escape, but after exploding with his cultivation, he exploded with an astonishing speed, directly rushing towards Chen Zong. The folding fan also opened in an instant, the edge of the fan filled with an astonishing sharpness, cutting horizontally towards Chen Zong's neck. Kill. Since it was against the rules to explode with his cultivation, then it did not matter if he killed Chen Zong on the spot. As for the other consequences, they could think about it later, because Tantai Bai Mu further felt the threat brought by Chen Zong. The change was really too fast. Even a peerless Heaven's Pride with a battle strength of 11 stars could not make a move in time. A ray of flowing light crossed the sky, incomparably fast and merciless. A smile appeared on Tantai Bai Mu's face. He did not believe that under such circumstances, Chen Zong still had time to react. But the fact was so despairing. Just in an instant, a shocking sword intent erupted. The sword light also increased in power by more than 10 times in an instant. It drew a half-arc, body and sword as one, and directly attacked Tantai Bai Mu. This sword, with an extremely strong murderous intent, showed no mercy. You want to kill me, I will kill you, so simple and direct. Too fast. Chen Zong's reaction speed was really too fast, completely unexpected. The explosion of the sword was also very terrifying. No kill sword technique. If it was a sword technique, there would be a delay, but the origin source sword technique would not. The sword light slashed, and the ray of flowing light was directly cut off, followed by Tantai Bai Mu's arm. With a scream, Tantai Bai Mu directly turned into a gust of wind, exploding with extreme speed, and rushed out of the Phoenix Hall, immediately escaping. Chen Zong chased after him without hesitation and slashed out with his sword again. No kill 5 swords. Endless murderous intent and killing intent were completely condensed into this sword, and directly hit Tantai Bai Mu, who had rushed out of the Phoenix Hall. There was a burst of screams. However, he could not catch up. Tantai Bai Mu seemed to have activated some kind of secret treasure to save his life, and his speed increased to the extreme. Chen Zong could not catch up, and could only watch him escape. However, with an arm cut off and the no kill 5 swords, further injured, it was definitely not a good feeling. Chapter 29-22. I went out in the morning. First update. In the morning Phoenix Hall, a sword-like figure stepped in with a shocking sword will. The moment he stepped into the morning Phoenix Hall, the shocking sword will quickly receded, completely disappearing as if nothing had happened. Chen Zong came back again. He didn't catch up to Tantai Bai Mu, but first, his arm was cut off, and then he was hit by the 5 slaying swords. Tantai Bai Mu was definitely not feeling well. This was a physical injury, and there was also a mental blow. If this matter were to spread, Tantai Bai Mu's reputation would be greatly affected, resulting in a negative impact. They had agreed that they would not use cultivation, martial will, or other extraordinary powers. They would only compete based on pure martial arts, but Tantai Bai Mu had violated this rule. This kind of rule was actually not that authoritative. Even if it was violated, it was fine, but that was in a situation where there were few people. Even if it spread out, it could be denied or even slandered. However, this was in front of the ancient Phoenix Divine Maiden, the heavenly Phoenix City Lord, and all the geniuses. Slandering Chen Zong instead? If he really did that, Tantai Bai Mu's fate would be even worse, because wouldn't that be slapping the faces of all the geniuses, the heavenly Phoenix City Lord, and the ancient Phoenix Divine Maiden? The double blow to his body and mind would definitely make Tantai Bai Mu vomit blood again and go crazy with anger. Chen Zong returned to the Phoenix Hall, and everyone's gazes were fixed on him, secretly shocked. In the first battle, he defeated the divine strength guardian deity and displayed one of his superb swordsmanship, as well as the terrifying attack power of the swordsmanship. Different swordsmen practiced different swordsmanship, and even the same swordsmanship would have different interpretations under different swordsmen's swordsmanship. The power of the swordsmanship was also different. The godly strength Vajra's defense was extremely shocking, but Chunzong could break it. This showed that Chunzong's sword technique attack was very terrifying. At least, the Golden Dragon Spear Zhao Ziming's spear technique could not break the godly strength Vajra's defense, but Chunzong did it. In the second battle, he defeated Tantai Bai Mu, not showing the super strong attack power of the sword technique, but the superb skill of the sword technique and super fast reaction speed. He reacted in an instant, and also the precise grasp of timing and the sharpness of the sword technique. Chunzong walked back to his original position and stood there quietly without saying anything. The two battles had proved Chunzong's strength and revealed his true self. The battles just now were very exciting, and my hands are itching. I wonder who would like to give me some pointers? He Zhanghai took a large step forward, and a shocking aura like wind, tigers, clouds, and dragons spread out, vigorous and majestic. Although that was what he said, He Zhanghai was actually very unhappy when he saw that the others were in the limelight while he, who had first suggested it, was standing at the side and watching. He was eager to show off. Normally, He Zhanghai wouldn't do this. However, at this moment, he was in front of the ancient phoenix divine maiden, so he naturally had to do his best. Boundless vast sea He Zhanghai. My iron palms can no longer hold back. He Zhanghai didn't need to use his cultivation or other transcendent powers. Who would be afraid of him? The moment He Zhanghai appeared, there were immediately people who stood out to fight against him. However, when He Zhanghai executed his iron palms, it was as though the vast ocean was flowing. His palm force was incomparably majestic and extremely shocking. He forcefully suppressed his opponent and defeated him. After 3 consecutive battles and 3 consecutive defeats, He Zhanghai was in high spirits as he laughed heartily. Who else? 3 consecutive victories caused He Zhanghai to fall into an indescribable excitement. He didn't understand the logic of stopping when he was ahead, and still intended to continue. Everyone wanted to show off their abilities in front of the ancient phoenix divine maiden, but now, He Zhanghai seemed to want to monopolize everything, which made people unhappy. Idiot! Bailey Wuyun's eyes narrowed slightly as he secretly mocked him. This He Zhanghai was just trash who had strength but no brains. Such a person still wanted to be as famous as him. This was simply the biggest joke in the world. Yi Tianfeng's figure flashed and appeared in front of He Zhanghai. There was no need for more words. They immediately started the battle. He Zhanghai's iron palms were vigorous and majestic, displaying what was called boundless vast sea. Yi Tianfeng's figure was extremely nimble, but this kind of nimbleness was different from Tantai Bomu's nimbleness. It was as though the clouds were constantly changing, gathering and dispersing unpredictably. He Zhanghai seemed to have met his nemesis. The vigorous and domineering palm force was simply unable to truly hit Yi Tianfeng. In the end, Yi Tianfeng seized the opportunity to defeat him. He Zhanghai's face was extremely gloomy. It was very ugly, as if the clouds were so dense that water was about to drip out. After Yi Tianfeng defeated He Zhanghai, he didn't plan to fight again. Instead, he let the other geniuses fight. Each of them had fought at least once and tried their best to display their abilities. Even if they were defeated, they had done their best. It wasn't that they were weak, but that their opponents were too strong. Each of the geniuses' martial arts were extraordinary. Chunzong watched the whole process and didn't miss anything. He even remembered it all as if it was branded. He absorbed the essence of others and integrated it into his own body to replenish himself. Previously, under the coincidence and incomparably solid foundation, his basic sword arts finally broke through the shackles of hundreds of years and advanced to a higher level. That was a brand new realm, a brand new level, a level that Chen Zong felt unfamiliar with. Even now, Chen Zong was still in the process of exploring. But even if he was in the process of exploring, reaching a new level in his sword arts did indeed bring him great benefits. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been so easy to defeat the Divine Strength Guardian and Tantai Baimu. In fact, Chen Zong was still holding back. At least, when facing the Divine Strength Guardian and Tantai Baimu, he didn't fully display his powerful sword arts, because they were not qualified to do so. Unparalleled Sword Chen Zong, in the Phoenix Battle Arena, you avoided the battle. This time, are you still afraid to fight with me? Suddenly, Shocking Sword Bailey Wuyun's eyes stared at Chen Zong, emitting a cold light. The corner of his mouth hung in a cold smile. Suddenly, there was silence. Bailey Wuyun wanted to challenge Chen Zong? And he said that Chen Zong avoided the battle in the Phoenix Battle Arena? Was that really the case? But the truth was that because of Yi Tianfeng's appearance, Chen Zong didn't fight just now. Otherwise, even if he lost, Chen Zong wouldn't avoid the battle. But Chen Zong wouldn't explain what had happened. There was no need for that. A peerless genius in the way of the sword challenged Chen Zong, a genius in the way of the sword. Would Chen Zong accept the challenge? Of course, he would fight. Why would Chen Zong avoid the battle? Previously in the Phoenix Battle Arena, Chen Zong didn't even plan to avoid the battle. Now that he was stronger, even if Chen Zong fought with all his strength, he wouldn't be afraid, let alone a battle of sword arts. So what if he was a peerless genius? Seeing Chen Zong walk out, Bailey Wuyun was secretly happy. Indeed, Chen Zong's sword arts were extraordinary and brilliant, but he wasn't weak either. He was confident that he could suppress Chen Zong and then defeat him. Bailey Wuyun was very confident in his sword arts. As a peerless genius in the way of the sword, if he wasn't confident, how could he suppress everyone with his sword? Confidence was a quality that everyone had to have. Bailey Wuyun smiled as he walked towards Chen Zong. Every step he took, there was a shocking aura condensing. This aura was constantly condensing. Although it wouldn't increase the power of the sword arts, it could still suppress the opponent. But this kind of aura couldn't affect Chen Zong in the slightest. When Bailey Wuyun was 5 meters away from Chen Zong, he suddenly jumped up and unsheathed his sword. The earth-shattering sword directly broke through the air without any mercy, as if he wanted to kill Chen Zong in one strike. Chen Zong's sword was also unsheathed in an instant. He pulled out his sword and the sword light broke through the air like a meteor. The two swords collided in an instant, bursting out countless sparks. A shocking sound rang out, sharp to the extreme. Attack, attack, attack. Bailey Wuyun's sword arts were extremely terrifying attacking sword arts. There was no defense at all. In other words, the best defense was to attack. It was an unstoppable and frenzied attack. The sword light burst out continuously. Every strike seemed to have the power to shock the heavens and was extremely terrifying. Such an attack was as shocking as a storm, pouring out in torrents. It was as if it was going to crush Chen Zong directly. Such an attack made the spectating geniuses hold their breaths. They didn't dare to make a sound. They were also imagining how they would defend against such an attack if they were to replace Chen Zong in the battle against Bailey Wuyun. Such terrifying and violent sword arts. Compared to when he defeated Silver Moon Saber, it was much more powerful. As expected of the shocking Sky Sword, Silver Moon Saber couldn't help but be secretly shocked. If the shocking Sky Sword had unleashed such a sword art in that battle, he would have been defeated in a few moves. Facing Bailey Wuyun's shocking sword arts, Chen Zong's expression didn't change. With one sword in hand, he completely defended against it. His sword arts were exquisite. Deflecting, borrowing, and exerting force were all displayed in an exquisite manner. It was like moving clouds and flowing water, understated and unhurried. Bailey Wuyun's expression was extremely solemn. He was roaring in his heart. How could his opponent's sword arts be so superb? It was even more exquisite than before. Could it be that he was holding back just now? With a thought, Bailey Wuyun's sword arts became even more terrifying. A shocking and murderous aura filled the air. Other than the flying sword arts, the Bailey clan had another sword art. It had evolved from the battlefield many years ago. It was an extremely terrifying army-killing sword art. When this sword art was displayed by Bailey Wuyun, the terrifying sword light brought with it a shocking murderous aura. It filled the air and caused the surrounding geniuses' expressions to change drastically. They felt a chill run down their spines. This sword art was extremely direct and extremely sharp. Chen Zong was secretly surprised. He was excited. As the sword art changed, there seemed to be a formless guidance, allowing Bailey Wuyun to display the sword art to his heart's content. Not long after, Chen Zong figured it out and immediately launched a counterattack. The moment the sword came into contact with Bailey Wuyun's sword, it immediately turned into a coil, like a spiritual snake. After the coil, it turned into a point, like a phoenix nodding its head. Then it turned into a stab, and with the change of his body's movements, the stab turned into a burst. Every change of the sword was so smooth and untraceable. Bailey Wuyun was caught off guard and couldn't react. The sword directly hit Bailey Wuyun's chest. In an instant, the power that was released was extremely shocking. It was extremely tyrannical. Bailey Wuyun's face revealed a look of pain. His body flew backwards. His feet left 2 marks on the ground. Blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. The burst of the sword was enough to shatter steel. Its power was extremely terrifying. Chen Zong held his sword and stood upright. He stared at Bailey Wuyun. His eyes were calm and deep. So what if you are an exceptional genius? You will still be defeated by my sword. Chapter 29-23. Thank you for letting me win. Chen Zong sheathed his sword and cupped his fists towards Bailey Yuntian with a faint smile. No matter how one looked at him, he looked very formal, humble and courteous, as if there was nothing wrong with him. However, Bailey Yuntian's eyes seemed as if they were about to spit fire, and his heart was filled with rage. He wanted nothing more than to erupt with the ultimate move of the Bailey Li flying sword technique and kill Chen Zong on the spot. However, he could not. He had to restrain himself. He was not an idiot like Tantai Bai Mu, who had not only failed to trick others but also tricked himself. He could not lose his self-control. Otherwise, all the effort he had put in tonight would be wasted. Control himself. No matter what, he had to control himself. Even if he was extremely angry and filled with killing intent, he had to control himself. After leaving this place, he would find a chance to kill this person and vent his anger. Bailey Wuyun valued his own interests and reputation. He could be shameless in private, but in front of everyone, he had to be. He wasn't an idiot like Tantai Bai Mu and He Zhonghai. Your sword technique is indeed very good. Bailey Wuyun wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and hid the violent killing intent in his heart. He smiled and said, however, my Bailey clan is most famous for the flying sword technique. Unfortunately, due to the rules, the flying sword technique cannot be used. Otherwise, I would have let Peerless Sword have a taste of it. It sounded like he was praising Chen Zong, but upon careful analysis, one would realize that he was implying that the reason why he had lost was because he had not shown his true abilities. Furthermore, he was not being unreasonable when he said that. The Bailey clan was indeed most famous for their flying sword techniques, and it was not something that was said for no reason. There will be a chance. Chen Zong replied in a neither fast nor slow manner. His words were filled with deep meaning, causing Bailey Wuyun's eyes to unconsciously narrow. Soon after, He revealed a cold smile and nodded his head. There will be a chance. Goddess, this Chenzong's sword technique is indeed very good. The maid on the left said to the ancient phoenix goddess in a low voice. Only she, the ancient phoenix goddess, and the maid on the right could hear her. It was undeniable that the swordsmanship displayed by Chenzong was indeed exquisite and superb. The speed at which he changed was shocking. No matter how exquisite or brilliant it is, it can't compare to the goddess, the maid on the right said with a sneer. However, the ancient phoenix divine maiden didn't say anything. This so-called welcoming banquet was actually an opportunity for the ancient phoenix divine maiden to secretly observe the prodigies. It was also an opportunity for the prodigies to display their abilities in front of the ancient phoenix divine maiden. However, it was Chenzong who was in the limelight at this banquet. Just the title of unparalleled sword had attracted a lot of attention, but at first it was all negative. But then, Chenzong won 3 battles and showed amazing swordsmanship in all of them. There was a faint feeling that his swordsmanship was peerless. Of course, he had not really reached that level, but he had been recognized to a certain extent. Chenzong, are you willing to become a blazing phoenix guard? The ancient phoenix divine maiden suddenly asked, issuing an invitation to Chenzong. Silence. For a moment, everyone in the surroundings fell into silence. Logically speaking, this was actually only the first round. After that, there would be a second round and even a third round before the final decision would be made. After all, the ancient Phoenix Mountain was very powerful and had a deep foundation. The ancient Phoenix Divine Maiden's status was extraordinary, so the selection of blazing Phoenix Guards was naturally very strict. All aspects would be tested comprehensively. But now, the ancient Phoenix Divine Maiden had directly asked Chenzong to become a blazing Phoenix Guard. This was absolutely shocking. Perhaps it couldn't be said to be unprecedented, but it was definitely an extremely rare situation. Envy. Bailey Wuyun was instantly envious. How could this be? Why was this happening? Why wasn't he the one who was directly invited by the ancient Phoenix Divine Maiden? At this moment, Bailey Wuyun was about to explode and use the killing move of the flying sword technique to kill Chenzong. How hateful! Chenzong was also a little stunned. He didn't expect the ancient Phoenix Divine Maiden to personally invite him. Thank you for your kindness, goddess. Chenzong was stunned, but quickly regained his composure. Then, he said, before that, can I ask the goddess a question? How dare you? Before the ancient Phoenix Divine Maiden could speak, the maidservant on her right suddenly stood up. Her face was cold, and she directly rebuked him. A terrifying aura also spread out from this maidservant's body. Like an invisible sharp blade, it directly rushed towards Chenzong. The other Sky Prides all had gloating looks on their faces. Chenzong was secretly shocked by the aura that this maidservant released, but he wasn't afraid at all. Instead, he waited for the ancient Phoenix Divine Maiden's response. The ancient Phoenix Divine Maiden seemed to look at the maidservant. With a look, the maidservant immediately sat down obediently. Then, she looked at Chenzong and replied, May I ask the goddess, do you know Yun Yanxin? As soon as Chenzong spoke, his voice trembled slightly. There was also some fluctuation in his eyes, as if there was a kind of hope and expectation. When everyone heard this and saw Chenzong's expression, they all showed a hint of surprise. Yun Yanxin? This was a person's name. It sounded like a woman's name. Who was she? What was her relationship with Chenzong? The ancient Phoenix Divine Maiden didn't directly answer. Instead, she asked, What's your relationship with her? Cultivation partner, Chenzong answered seriously. His expression was sincere, his eyes were deep, and his voice was low. The love of my life. Some people couldn't help but be moved, but others showed a hint of disapproval. Sorry, I've never heard of it. The ancient Phoenix Divine Maiden also seemed to be affected. Her tone became gentler. If I hear of it in the future, I'll tell you. Thank you, goddess. Chen Zong bowed to the ancient phoenix divine maiden with his sword. I'm going to find her myself. So, Chen Zong will take his leave. Hearing Chen Zong's words, everyone couldn't help but be stunned. Leave? What did that mean? Could it be that he rejected the ancient phoenix divine maiden's invitation? The ancient phoenix divine maiden was also stunned. She never thought that she would be rejected when she personally invited him. It was unbelievable. Seeing Chen Zong turn around and stride out of Morning Phoenix Hall, everyone couldn't tell what they were feeling in their hearts. It was as if, in an instant, it was boring. Everyone couldn't understand why Chen Zong would do that. Could it be that it was because he wanted to find his cultivation partner? If that was the case, then wouldn't it be easier for him to become a burning phoenix guard of the ancient phoenix divine maiden and use the power of the ancient phoenix mountain to find her than to search by himself? Why did he refuse? They didn't understand. They didn't understand Chen Zong's heart. Chen Zong really didn't have the slightest interest in becoming someone else's guard. If the ancient phoenix divine maiden knew Yunyanxin, or had heard of Yunyanxin and so on, then perhaps Chen Zong would agree to become a burning phoenix guard of the ancient phoenix divine maiden. This way, it would be easier for him to find Yunyanxin. However, since the ancient phoenix divine maiden didn't know Yunyanxin, nor had she heard of this name, then Chen Zong couldn't force himself to change the decision in his heart and become a burning phoenix guard of the ancient phoenix divine maiden. If he didn't become a burning phoenix guard of the ancient phoenix divine maiden, he couldn't use the power of the ancient phoenix mountain to find Yunyanxin. However, Chen Zong believed that the things that happened today would definitely make the name, Yunyanxin, be remembered by other prodigies, and even spread out because of this. Unknowingly, it would be of great help to him in finding Yunyanxin. All of this was within Chen Zong's initial plan. Although he couldn't completely grasp the process, the result was equivalent to not deviating much from the plan. Unless Yunyanxin wasn't in the ancient phoenix domain, otherwise, she would hear the news and know that he had come to find her. And if Yunyanxin wasn't in the ancient phoenix domain, then even if Chen Zong became a burning phoenix guard, it wouldn't be so easy to find her. The ancient phoenix mountain's influence was mostly in the ancient phoenix domain. There were other major forces in other domains that controlled everything. With Chen Zong's departure, it was difficult for the banquet to maintain the previous enthusiasm. Even if the heavenly phoenix city lord deliberately mediated, it still couldn't recover. After all, the ancient phoenix divine maiden had taken the initiative to recruit Chen Zong, but Chen Zong had rejected her. This had a great impact on the other prodigies. It felt as if they desperately wanted something, but Chen Zong had ignored them. It felt as if they weren't on the same level. After leaving the heavenly phoenix city lord's residence, Chen Zong first returned to the inn where he lived, and found Yang Yi and the others. "Brother Yang, thank you for your hospitality these past few days." Chen Zong saluted them with his sword. Indeed, during this period of time, the cost of living in the inn had been paid by Yang Yi. It wasn't that Chen Zong wanted to freeload, but Chen Zong didn't have any cultivation coins. Chen Zong would remember this kindness. But now it was time to part ways. He would remember this kindness in his heart and repay it in the future. "Brother Chen, where do you plan to go next?" Although Yang Yi was reluctant to part, he also understood, so he asked. "I'm not sure. I'll travel around and challenge the strong." Chen Zong smiled and said, "Maybe I'll leave the ancient phoenix domain and travel the ancient profound world." If he couldn't find Yunyanxin in the ancient phoenix domain, then he would leave for other domains. He might even have to travel the entire ancient profound world to search. If he still couldn't find Yunyanxin, then it could only mean that Yunyanxin was no longer in the ancient profound world. "Then I hope that Brother Chen's name will spread throughout the ancient profound world and surpass your peers." Yang Yi smiled. Before Chen Zong left, Yang Yi treated Chen Zong to a meal in a restaurant as a farewell. Even if you can see your friend off for 1,000 miles, you still have to part in the end. Chernzong walked out of the gate of Heavenly Phoenix City and looked back. This city was his first stop in the inner universe. Here, he had made a name for himself with the unparalleled sword. Next, he would challenge more powerhouses and spread the name of the unparalleled sword even further. As for the Seal the Sky Monument, Chernzong would also go there and leave his own title on it. Unparalleled Jiandi. His trip here was not in vain. Thinking of this, Chernzong felt full of motivation. Looking for people to gain experience was not a bad idea. So, what about the next stop? Where should he go? Chernzong thought for a while, and suddenly felt that maybe he should go and get some cultivation coins first. Only then would he be able to act better. Otherwise, sometimes, a single coin would stump a hero. A dignified heaven's pride of a generation was bound by cultivation coins. What a joke! As he pondered, Chernzong took action. In the inner layer of the universe's ancient profound world, other than the cities, there were many bandits. Chernzong was prepared to find trouble with some bandits and snatch their cultivation coins. Rob the rich to help the poor. Robbing the rich bandits to help the poor. First he had to get rich so that he could act better. Chapter 29-24. In the inner universe, the ancient mystic world was extremely vast. Just the ancient Phoenix domain alone was astonishing. In this domain, there were mountains and forests, rivers and rivers. There were sects, clans, gangs, and so on. There were also some mountain strongholds that were the home of bandits and rogues. The Green Wolf stronghold on the Green Wolf Mountain was a bandit group. Their ferocious reputation shook the region, and everyone within a few hundred miles knew of them. Within the stronghold, there were more than 10 heaven stage powerhouses, and the strongest, the stronghold master, had battle prowess at the low extreme stage. This made it difficult for anyone to exterminate them. Of course, if one's battle prowess was strong enough to surpass the 10-star level, it might not be impossible. It was just that the ancient Phoenix domain was so vast. To the ancient Phoenix domain, a few hundred miles of land was not inferior to a small island in the sea. Unless it was a coincidence, there wouldn't be any heaven-rank powerhouses of the high extreme realm or even the super extreme realm running over to destroy the Green Wolf Bastion. Unfortunately, Chernzong was coincidentally passing by the Green Wolf stronghold. He happened to encounter the Green Wolf stronghold who were blocking his way and robbing him. Chernzong, who was lacking in cultivation coins, rushed directly to the Green Wolf stronghold. With a sword in hand, he was invincible. The stronghold master with the battle strength of the low realm was indeed not weak. However, in front of Chernzong, he was not enough. He was crippled in 10 moves. As for killing, Chernzong still remembered the black mark. He did not plan to give the black mark any chance to devour the soul. This was because Chernzong was not sure if his sealing technique would work or if it could truly seal the black mark. In the end, the sealing technique was just a casual mastery. It did not take much effort and time. As a result, almost all of the Green Wolf stronghold people were crippled by Chernzong, but he did not kill them. Next, he searched the entire stronghold and found the stronghold's treasury. There were more than 30,000 cultivation coins. There were also other treasures such as divine medicine, divine iron, and so on. However, Chernzong was not clear about the price of the divine medicine and divine iron. He kept them first and sold them after entering a city. With more than 30,000 cultivation coins, Chernzong was relieved. At least he did not have to worry about food and drink. It was a hobby. Unparalleled sword Chernzong exterminated the Green Wolf Bastion here. Before leaving the Green Wolf Bastion, Chernzong carved a stone tablet with his sword and stuck it in front of the main gate of the Green Wolf Bastion. There were 11 words carved on it, and each word was very clear. Each word contained a strong sword will that could last for at least 10 years without dissipating. Generally speaking, Chen Zong would not be so high profile. Even if he destroyed a mountain village, he would not deliberately leave his name. But now, in order to spread the name and title of unparalleled sword Chen Zong as soon as possible, Chen Zong would use all kinds of methods as long as they did not violate his principles. Chen Zong left, leaving behind only his title and name. It was a deliberate move, but it later promoted Chen Zong's reputation. At the same time, it also benefited many swordsmen. That was because the 11 words contained an astonishing sword will, which could be comprehended and benefited from. After that, Chen Zong began his challenge to become famous. Wild Thunderblade, a heaven-rank powerhouse of the low extremity realm, was not considered a prodigy. According to Taishuan's evaluation, he was a prodigy. But to be able to reach the 10-star level, he had to go through a long period of cultivation and some opportunities to finally break through and attain this level of combat strength. Not only prodigies, top prodigies, peerless prodigies, and monstrous prodigies could enter the extreme realm. Even ordinary practitioners could do it. But the difference between prodigies and prodigies was that prodigies could enter the extreme realm in a much shorter period of time. For example, they could do it after cultivating for a few decades. However, ordinary practitioners or prodigies would need a much longer period of time. For example, a few hundred years of continuous cultivation, continuous accumulation, and with the help of some opportunities, they would finally be able to break through the ordinary level of combat strength and reach the extreme realm. However, most of these practitioners' intelligence would stop at the 10-star level. Only a few could reach the 11-star level. As for reaching the 12-star level, it was very rare since ancient times. Above the 12-star level, the invincible realm was not something that ordinary prodigies or ordinary people could reach. Even if they had great opportunities, it was still difficult, unless they could really be reborn and have a peerless opportunity to change their fate. Although Wild Thunderblade was not a prodigy, he had been immersed in the 10-star level for hundreds of years. His blade technique was exquisite and peerless, as violent as thunder. He had completely grasped his own strength and was able to exert his strength to the extreme. He had also developed many unique techniques that were compatible with himself. He was a good opponent. After a fierce battle, Chen Zong's technique was superior and defeated Wild Thunderblade. It was a complete defeat. Your Excellency's swordsmanship is superb. I lost. Wild Thunderblade looked defeated, as if he was at his mercy. The loser might be killed. This was normal. After all, challenging others was a very dangerous thing to do. One had to disregard life and death. Your blade technique is not bad, Chen Zong said calmly. I won't kill you, but you have to spread the results of this battle. Okay. Wild Thunderblade was a little surprised and a little surprised. Chen Zong left. He did not take Wild Thunderblade's life, nor did he rob him of his wealth. Because Chen Zong's original intention was to challenge others. On the one hand, he wanted to sharpen his own swordsmanship. On the other hand, he wanted to promote the reputation of matchless sword Chen Zong and let more people know about it, so that Yu Nianxin would hear about it. Assuming that Yu Nianxin was really in the inner universe, what was the purpose of sharpening his swordsmanship? Of course, it was to go further. Moreover, the breakthrough in Sky Phoenix City had brought his basic swordsmanship to a whole new level, which made Chen Zong feel that it had amazing potential. He had not fully mastered it yet. If he did, the power of his swordsmanship would be even more powerful. Comprehending and cultivating on one's own was one way, but fighting with a strong opponent was a more effective way of sharpening. The new basic swordsmanship realm directly raised the upper limit of Chen Zong's potential in swordsmanship to a whole new level. This battle made Chen Zong feel that his swordsmanship potential had been stimulated by a lot. 1 battle, 2 battles, 3 battles, 4 battles. 5 battles. As long as Chen Zong could find a heaven stage powerhouse with a battle prowess of the low realm, he would directly challenge them. Geniuses had their own strengths, and the older generation's low realm powerhouses also had their own strength. After all, time was an excellent medicine. After a long period of time, one's skills were very good. Some of the people who were challenged by Chen Zong were calm and gentle, but some were very irritable. However, they were still defeated by Chen Zong in the end. The worst thing was that Chen Zong did not kill them, but crippled them. All in all, in a short period of less than 2 months, Chen Zong had fought in all directions and challenged more than 10 battles. He had won consecutively, and the name of the peerless sword had spread and was known by even more people. In addition, everything that happened at the Phoenix banquet at the Sky Phoenix City Lord's mansion was also spread, further increasing Chen Zong's reputation. On the contrary, Tantai Baimu's reputation was not good and was directly damaged. Inside the Daluo Palace, in the Tianluo Palace, Tantai Baimu's face was ashen. 2 months ago, at the Phoenix banquet at Sky Phoenix City, his arm was cut off by Chen Zong. When he used a secret treasure to escape, he was hit by his opponent's sword and his thigh was pierced. The terrifying sword aura wreaked havoc and caused even more damage. After a month and a half, he returned to the Daluo Palace at his fastest speed. It took him a full month and a half and spent more than half of his wealth to finally recover from his injuries. His severed arm had also grown back. After coming out of seclusion, he suffered a mental blow and his reputation was damaged. Anger. Tantai Baimu was furious to the extreme. Chen Zong must die. Everything was because of this person. Only by killing this person could he vent the hatred in his heart. He completely did not think that it was because he had tricked Chen Zong time and time again that led to this. Otherwise, if it was just a competition for the name cards, Chen Zong would not have cared at all. However, Tantai Baimu was also very clear that with just him and his subordinates, even if they joined forces to kill Chen Zong, it would be very difficult. After all, the opponent was not a fool. If he could not win, he could run. If he wanted to kill, he had to kill without giving the opponent the slightest chance to escape. He had to completely block and cut off all escape routes to prevent future troubles. Tantai Baimu suddenly thought about how to kill Chen Zongjiu. This would require more people and a meticulous plan. Then, who should he ask to help? Ming Lai's strength is very strong. It is said that he has broken through to the level of the final realm. Moreover, he only recognizes money and not people. As long as the price is enough, everything can be discussed. Tantai Baimu said to himself. However, he showed a somewhat distressed expression. The treatment of the injury had cost more than half of his savings. If he asked Ming Lai to help now, he was afraid that he would not have much wealth left. Moreover, Ming Lai alone could not guarantee that Chen Zong would be killed in one go. 2 more of the final realm. 5 people should be enough. Tantai Baimu thought to himself. When he did things, he liked to plan before acting. Once he acted, he had to have a perfect plan. He would rather spend a little more effort than to have an unforeseen event happen because of insufficient strength. Kill. It was to directly kill without leaving the slightest leeway and not give the opponent the slightest chance to live. Soon, a plan formed in Tantai Baimu's mind. Stormy Wave Castle. This was a small unrated force in the ancient Phoenix domain. Although it was unrated, it was not weak. The lord of the castle was a veteran heaven-rank powerhouse with the battle strength of the 10-star realm. His stormy wave palm was extremely tyrannical. Within a radius of a few hundred miles, his prestige was awe-inspiring. At this moment, the sun was setting in the west. After the lord of the stormy wave castle had finished his dinner, he was resting in his study for a moment when a servant came to deliver a letter. The lord of the stormy wave castle opened it and saw that it was a letter of challenge. Unparalleled sword Chen Zong. What a coincidence! The corner of the Lord of the Stormy Wave Castle's mouth suddenly hung a smile. He knew this person because, in the past 2 months, he was in the limelight and had a great reputation. He went around challenging heaven-rank powerhouses of the final realm and won every battle. It was indeed very shocking. Now, he had finally come to challenge him. Putting down the letter of challenge, a sly smile appeared on the Lord of the Stormy Wave Castle's face. Unparalleled Sword Chunzong, this challenge will be your final song. The Lord of the Stormy Wave Castle muttered to himself as a fierce light flashed in his eyes. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.